Of all of the magic I perform, this feels the most real. No matter where you are, you simply take out 10 tarot cards, and suddenly, everything changes. I want you to remember this moment, that I did something before you did anything.
Yeah.
I want you to remember this moment that I put down this card.
Okay.
I want you to look through your cards like a poker hand, but don't let me see them. And I want you to choose one of those cards that you can have represent someone in your life. Actually match one of those cards to someone that you know. And when you have that person in mind, set it here, but face down so we can't see it. Beautiful, beautiful. And I want you to look at me and think about this person and what they mean to you. Deep breath, and let it out. Good. When you hold out your hand one more time, good. Look at me. Oh, this is someone who is very close to you, isn't that right?
Yes.
This isn't someone that you've met recently. You go way back with them.
Yes.
In fact, I even say you've known this person for years. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. A lot of people think of a friend who they've known for a long time, but I think you went with a family member. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Is there any way that I could know any of this?
No.
All right, think about this person, who they are, what they mean to you. Would this person identify as a man?
Yes.
Good. They are taller than you
Yes.
and older than you.
Yes.
You've gotten quite a bit of guidance from them in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And you think that they're a person full of a lot of emotional fortitude. Like, they're complex, but they're really smart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
And would you say that this person is good at solving problems?
Yes.
Are you thinking of your father?
Yes. What?
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Now, you could have used any card to represent your dad, and you could have thought of anyone who you know. Is that right?
Uh-huh.
Will you flip over that card and show me what card you used to represent him?
Literally, my head is so sweaty right now.
Oh, you used strength to represent your dad. Remember, I set my card down before you did anything.
Right.
Flip it over.
No.
Shut up.
Oh my god!
Oh my god.
What?
Would you like to do it again?
Yeah. No. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, let's do it a little differently this time, all right?
Okay.
So pick up that card and mix it back in. Once again, mix them up so I don't know what is what.
I don't know which one.
Oh yeah, I got the
Good,
eyes.
good, good. So this time we are going to do it a little differently, okay? This time I'm still gonna start by taking a card and setting it on the table, but we'll do it a little differently. I want you to look through the cards, and I want you to choose one more card that represents someone else, someone in your life. When you have someone, just go ahead and set it there face down so I can't see it. The suspense is killing me.
Me too.
Good, you have one. Good. Now I want you to also think of one that represents you in a way. Now wait, I'm gonna try to size you up here, Melissa. Yeah, I think this right here, I think this is you. Now, we've all been all of these different people at different times, but think back to time in your life, to a specific time in your life where you could be represented by one of those cards, and choose one that represents you and then set it on top right there. Just make a small pile. Now, I certainly don't want it to be obvious. You can change your mind. You're happy
I don't
there?
know. I don't know anymore.
Okay,
I don't know
great.
anything anymore.
No, you're doing
change it.
great. You're doing great. Now I just want you to set down. Let's go with a random card. Just set down any random card you'd like. Fantastic. And then one more random one. I'll set down this one. Notice I set mine down before you did. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Good. Now think about that time in your life where you were represented by one of those cards. And I think it has something to do with a character trait that you feel is an important part of you as a core. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And I think this time it was very crucial in your development to make you who you are right now. And I think that time in your life you had a really strong sense of right and wrong. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Think back to that other person. Do you remember the other person? Mm-hmm. The first card that you set down? Is this a friend of yours?
No.
No. You sure?
Yes.
Do they think that you're friends?
Maybe.
I think they think that you're more friends than you feel towards them. But I think you stay away from this person a bit because you think they make bad decisions. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Now remember, I always dealt my cards before you did. And I left myself with one card and one card only.
Me too.
So did you. Will you flip it over so I can see it? You flip it over and hold it like this, but so I can see it? Just turn it over that way? Oh, you used strength? That was the last one? Look what I left myself.
There's no way! There's no way! What is this?
Go ahead and set it down right there. And will you pick up the rest of the cards like you're about to deal a game of cards? Just hold them like this. And I want you to flip over that top card face up right there. Yeah, flip it over. Flip over the next one.
Stop it!
And the next one.
Oh my god!
Shut up!
What?
Amazing.
Thank you so much for joining me for this experience.
Thank you. Wait, what?
It doesn't matter if you have zero experience using tarot cards. The Oracle system allows you to directly read people's minds and predict their future actions. I'm going to show you how you can use these cards to create stunning demonstrations of mind reading that your audience will never forget. The special gimmicks that you receive make the trick work every single time. They allow you to reveal intimate, personal details about someone who you've never met. And at the end, when you turn over the cards, you show you've predicted all of their decisions. Plus, the method is easy and reliable, so you can focus on your presentation. And hold your hand out towards me. This piece makes you stand out in a crowded world of card and coin tricks. People care about themselves, and the Oracle system, it's all about them. I'm also joined by one of my close friends and favorite mind readers, Luke Germain. Luke uses tarot cards on stage every single night, and he's going to talk about some of his secrets that he's never shared before. This effect, it's not a tarot card reading. It's a stunning series of mentalism reveals that create a powerful, memorable, and engaging experience for anyone you perform it for.
Is there any way that I could have done
It's
this?
completely about
I
them,
don't think so.
their lives, their choices, their future. For more than 10 years, this has been my closely guarded secret. And now, I want to share it with you. Welcome to the Oracle system. This is a very powerful piece of mentalism that I do all the time. It served me very well, and I'm excited that you're adding it to your repertoire. There's a lot of details here. The routine itself is actually quite simple, but I'm breaking it down with all of the information that I've learned over years of performing this routine so that you can be the best that you can be. Enjoy. This dial effect is based on Brother John Hammond's matching 10-card routine. It was published in 1958 under the name The Million to One Chance. Alan Ackerman later released his own handling in the booklet Here's My Card, that was published in 1978. Alan credits Louis Simonoff with helping clean up the handling. Another precursor is a routine by Hen Fetch that was released by Gene Gordon under the name Symbologic, marketed in the early 1960s. These routines brought forth a whole bunch of new variations in the works of Carl Fulves, Stephen Minch, Peter Duffy, Roy Walton, and Nick Trost, as well as more recent ones by Clint Barron, John George, and many others. Years ago, my dear friend Rob Dominich turned me onto the matching 10-card ESP routine with his own handling. After he did a creative deep dive, he found that his sequence was strikingly similar to a handling created by Homer Arcana in the book ESP Arcana. That book has some great ideas which can be applied to this effect, if you're interested. Although I had explored the plot in the past, it was actually my friend Rob who really brought this sequence to my attention in a powerful way. So this project wouldn't be possible without him. Thanks, buddy. Even though this effect is perceived very differently from the originals, the structure remains primarily unchanged from the Arcana handling, despite a few subtleties and slights that I added. However, the direction to go from Zener cards to tarot cards is what really brings this to new life in a different way. It opens up many more possibilities, as you'll see. It should be noted that the use of tarot cards in a mystery performance has been well explored by a number of performers, including Kristen Shellman, Stephen Minch, Brother Shadow, Jim Magnus, Luke Germay, Jared Kopf, John Wilson, and many others. In 2010, I stepped away from publishing magic. My goal was just to focus on performing. I decided that if I was ever going to step out of retirement and publish again, I had to have something that would actually justify it. That's why we're here right now. This routine has so many advantages. A few of them are that it is strong close-up mentalism. That's a thing that's really hard to come by. You get personal reveals without the spectator writing anything down, which is awesome. Pocket space is important. You can just slide these 10 cards into your breast pocket and you're good to go. It can be performed completely surrounded. In fact, I often do it surrounded. And it is very malleable. This can be a short, brief miracle, or it can stretch on and be 10 minutes of hardcore mentalism. My record for performing this trick has been like 22 minutes. I don't necessarily recommend that, but you can go that long if you want to. It can also be repeated for different groups if you'd like, or repeated for the same group. All right, you made it through the nitty-gritty. Let's get into the trick. And we'll start with the cards, of course. These tarot cards, they're based on the Rider-Waite tarot card design. It's probably the most recognizable tarot card, at least in the United States, and also you could argue internationally as well. These are so standard that someone who's really into tarot will see them and immediately recognize them, in the same way that someone who is a card player would see a deck of bicycles and be like, yeah, it's a deck of cards, I get it. There's a couple key differences, though. I recolored all of these cards, and the reason I did that is because the Rider-Waite deck, most of them have this sort of gross yellow background, and they all look the same. So when you do the reveals at the end, when you see them, you kind of have to look closely to see, oh, do they match? Yeah, they do match, and that wasn't cool at all. So I wanted them to immediately be recognized as a match, even by a small child watching from across the room. Although if you're performing this for small children, you probably make terrible decisions. You will also notice that I only have 5 cards in front of me, and you are probably looking down at 12. There's a good reason for that. Each player in the game, performer and the spectator, each person gets 5 cards. So you have 6 total to choose from, and I'll explain that shortly. Let's talk about the back of the cards. These cards are marked. Now, I wanted the marks to be really subtle and hard to see, but at the same time, I wanted them to pop out at you as soon as you knew the system, so that a spectator wouldn't catch you, but you could easily recognize the mark. I spent a lot of time, probably, I think it was 45 different marking systems that I tried before I settled on this one, so it's been really well thought out. Photoshop on my computer almost punched me in the face. It took a lot of time, but I'm really happy with the final result. So you can look at your cards if you want to. We will let you pause the video so you can check and try to find the marks, and then come back to it. And we're back. You didn't do anything, did you? You didn't press pause. I didn't think so. All right, let's get into the marks. Each card is marked in 3 different places. 2 of the marks are the same and tell you what card it is, and there's another mark that tells you the orientation of the card. Don't worry about that one yet. We'll explain. If you look at one of the cards, you will see that it is made up of a number of squares. It's kind of hard to see there, so I printed a bigger copy to make it easier. There's these diamond-shaped or square-shaped pieces that make up the card, sort of plotted throughout. What you're looking for is the area that has perpendicular lines crossing each other, and they look like this. The marks are in the bottom right corner and the top left corner. It's the box that is a fully complete box. In other words, none of it's actually going off the side of the card, but it's in these 2 corners. So the location of the marks are here and here. This is the area that you're going to be looking in when you're getting the mark. Now, as we continue with the marking section, I want you to relax if you don't really see the markings. A lot of people struggle to see them at first. And I've shown these to some magician and mentalist friends who are like, oh, dude, I can't read these. And within a few minutes of practicing, once you understand the system, you're going to start to get them. So don't freak out if you can't see them yet, or if you're unsure if you'll be able to see them in performance. Trust me, you will. Before I go any farther, I want to tell you that my good friend and creative collaborator in a lot of different projects, Tim Catlett, helped me with all of the design. He's the one who took the marking system that I came up with and the color schemes for the front and actually made them look good. Tim's been my partner on a lot of different projects, and he's awesome. All right, let's take a look at the marks. So the first card I want to talk about is the Fool. Once again, we are looking in this area. What you're looking for when you're looking for marks is called cutout work. It's areas that traditionally have been sort of whited out or blocked out. Usually ink would be scratched off of a card by a gambler. We printed the gimmicks so they look perfect for you. But what you're looking for is places where these perpendicular lines have been erased in one direction. It's subtle at first, but once you see where they are and you look back, they sort of pop out. So with this card, which is the Fool, the perpendicular lines have been cut out of this area, this area, this area, this area, and then on the other side of that area, right there. So if you look in this spot on the cards, you'll see that there's actually no perpendicular lines. They've been cut out. So once again, this right here is the Fool card, a bigger version of it, and this is where the marks are. So if you study the card, you'll see that these cross-hatch marks have been whited out right there using cutout work. So that is the Fool. Next, we have the Devil. The Devil has the cutout work here and here. So essentially, if you think about it, it's two lines that are white. Once again, the comparison is this. You can see that this area, this line has been taken out completely right there. So the Devil is the card that I think of as the marks that have lines on it. That helps with my mnemonic that I'll talk about in a bit. Next is the Strength card. The Strength card is the only mark that actually leaves this marking area that I talked about. That's because it's such a strong card that the marks are so strong they go outside of the mark. That's one of the things I use to remember it. The Strength card has the area here that's been cut out, but also the areas here, here, and here. So it kind of forms a box, leaving the marking area and going out to here. So once again, the comparison is this. If you look at your card in the corner, you'll see that the cutout work is there. All of this area has been cut out. So in the marking area that I spoke about earlier, and then also outside of it there. That's Strength. Next is the Empress. The Empress looks subtle at first, but the reason for that is because the cutout work is the entire marking area. If you look, every single one of these perpendicular lines going this direction in the marking area has been cut out. So the Empress is essentially this entire area cut out. So if you look at your card, you'll see that it's lighter. The entire marking area is actually lighter than all of the other boxes. It seems subtle at first, but again, once you look at it and get the marking system in your head, it pops right out at you. That's the Empress. Next, we have the Lovers card. The Lovers card has a small mark, and the cutout work is just right here, here, and there. It's those four areas. It's just right in the center of the card. So if you look at the center of your Lovers card, you'll see that the cutout work is right there in the middle, in the heart of the card. That's Lovers. Lastly but leastly, we have Justice. Justice is probably the most subtle of all of the marks. Justice is only cut out here, 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 and here. It's in the corners. It's the more subtle one, so if I glance down at a mark and I don't see a mark, I know that it's going to be justice, but I also, instead of leaving one card unmarked completely, wanted to have the little reminder to make sure I knew that this one was justice if I wanted to double check. So once again, the comparison, if you look at justice, it's just those areas cut out right there. In other words, this white line here continues on further into the marking area. And those are the marks. Now, I have a system that I use to help remind me which mark is which. Of course, I don't use it anymore. It just jumps into my head the moment I see the mark. I know what the card is. But when I first started out, I had the following marking system. The Fool is this. With the Fool, I think of the fact that it's foolish to mark both sides of the marking area because the marks are on opposite sides. I think that's a foolish thing to do. It's foolish to mark both sides. Next is the Devil. The Devil, I talked about it being two lines. I think of the word lie and the word line sound similar. The devil is said to be a liar, lines lie, so when I see lines, I think of the devil. Next is strength. I kind of alluded to this earlier. The marks are so strong that they go outside of the marking area. That's strength. The Empress is totally open. This entire marking area is open because the cutout work is over there. Women are thought to be more emotionally open than men, so I think women, open, the Empress is a woman, Empress, open. The Lovers has the mark in the heart of the card. That's because lovers love with the heart. And lastly, Justice. Justice is marked in the four corners. I think about the phrase, the four corners of justice. Justice is the cornerstone of any civilization. There's also a band called Justice. That is an album called Cross that has the image of a crucifix, which is 1, 2, 3, 4 points. So those are the little devices I use. Again, if you're looking at the marks and you're thinking, these seem hard to see, my first thought is for you to set it down. Instead of trying to look at the specific areas, just kind of relax your eyes. It's not like a magic eye poster where you have to cross your eyes to try to see it, but just kind of relax and look for the area that is lighter. Start with strength because that's the easiest mark to see. Once you sort of get comfortable with that, the Fool is a little bit, is similarly marked to strength, and then the Devil as well. The lines are pretty easy to see. And then Justice and the Empress might be a little more challenging, but like I said, with a little bit of practice, you'll get it. If you're wondering why you have 12 cards in front of you and there's only 10 cards used in the routine, here's why. When I was workshopping this routine, I showed it to a lot of magicians and mentalists who I respected, friends, peers, mentors, etc. I did it for Eric Mead, and he really liked the effect, but he said, you know what? There's a lot of people who are going to see the Devil card and be turned off. Maybe he didn't say a lot, but I think he said some. If your spectators are very religious, or if you're performing in certain areas, you might want to omit the Devil card and instead exchange it with the Lover's card, which is the one that I included as the alternative. Typically when I perform this, I leave the Lover's card out of the deck, but certainly if I'm going to perform this for people who I think might be very religious or easily offended, I'll take the Devil out, plug in the Lovers instead. Now let's briefly talk about the one-way mark. If you look in the center of the card, you'll see that there are two lines that meet in the middle and across. These lines have been offset, so if you look closely, I'll highlight it by drawing over them. So if you look closely, you'll see that the two boxes here and here are different sizes. One of them is a bit bigger than the other, and that helps tell you the orientation. So when you get to the final reveals and you flip it over, you can flip it over in the correct orientation, or if it's like this, you can flip it over this way so that the reveal looks nice and pretty. When you're first learning this, again, don't worry about that, but as you go on further, you'll notice that the bigger box should land towards you because you're the bigger performer, or use whatever you want to help remind you. So the bigger box is farther away from me right now, so that means that when I turn it over, I want to turn it over so that the bigger box is closer to me, like that. Here's an important point. When I hold the cards in my hand, I actually hold them upside down. And the reason for this is it allows me to just set down the card like this to the table, and then when I flip it over, rotating it away from me, it will be facing the correct direction. Usually the spectator will be looking at them like this because they have to read them. They'll also set them down like this, and that kind of leaves both cards in the same orientation. In both cases, the words will be closer to me, and in both cases, you reveal them forward like that. There's probably two types of people watching right now. One who are scared that the spectators are going to see the marks, and another group of people who are so scared that they're too subtle and they won't be able to read them. So let me try to compensate for both of those worries. I give these to people all the time. They constantly go into their hands. I've had people take them and look at them, and I don't mind. I don't freak out. I don't let them look at them forever, but I will definitely let them handle them. And if someone's looking at the back, I stay very relaxed. And I mean, if you immediately take them away, then it looks super suspicious. I say, oh, no, please. Yeah, they're just tarot cards. Please look at them all you'd like. So for those people, you shouldn't really worry. I give them to my friend Mike Kaplan, who's a phenomenal comedian, very smart analytical guy. I handed them to him and I said, Mike, these are marks. Find the marks. And he found them, but eventually. He was handling them for much longer than anyone would handle them in performance. For the other group of people, if you're scared you're not going to be able to see them, just practice. It won't even take you that long. Just get used to doing it. When I designed the system, I wanted to even be able to read the marks without my glasses on. So, for instance, and I'm not cheating here, I promise, that one's strength. This one right here, that is justice. And I'll show you that is justice. That is strength. That one right here, that's the Fool, right there. This one there is the Devil, and then, of course, that one's the Empress. So if you're worried about not being able to read the marks, just practice a little bit. You will get them. When we were designing the gimmicked cards, we went through tons and tons of different types of card stock to find the best one. We eventually settled on one that was more expensive for Vanishing Ink, but it's by far the best. It feels the most like tarot cards, and it also holds up and lasts the longest. If you feel like you want to jump ahead, you also now have access to the PDF. That's my original write-up from this routine, so you can certainly go back and read through any of this if you find that you want to speed ahead, or if you learn better by reading than by watching. An important point in this routine is that the revelations, revealing of the information about the people that the spectator is thinking of, that's really the meat of the routine. We'll get into that stuff a little bit later, but keep in mind, right now we're going to focus on the method and the endings, and then at the end we're going to get back to what is probably the most important part of the trick, revealing information about people. One of the reasons this routine is so deceptive is that it's, in a way, the trick that can't be explained. Back to Die Vernon. It always comes back to Vernon. This trick has different outcomes, so depending on what happens, it ends in different ways, which makes it almost impossible to reconstruct. So there's a few different ways, 6 total, that the routine can end. I assure you that this is not daunting. It's actually a thing that makes it fun to perform in the moment, because when you start, you don't even know how you're going to end. But the best part is that all 6 outcomes are really, really strong. So you don't need to get bummed out if one comes up. You'll find that they're all really strong and really great. So essentially, you're going to be working one behind. So the first thing I do is I look at the spectator, and like I'm playing them in poker, I size them up and I try to figure out what card they're actually going to choose to represent someone in their life. Now the language is such. I want you to look through your cards, and I want you to choose a card that you can compare to someone in your life. Actually match someone in your life to one of those cards. And when you have that person in mind, set that card face down right there. So there's an interesting little psychological trick that happens here. Of all of the cards, there are 2 really positive cards, the Empress and Strength, 2 more negative cards, the Devil and the Fool, and Justice, which is kind of neutral. When I tell the spectator to compare someone in their life to one of those cards, they have the social pressure of not wanting to say, oh yeah, someone in my life is like the Devil. So the 2 cards that are going to come up the most often for the very first card are the Empress and Strength. But I also look at that spectator and I think, which card do I think they would play? because it's usually going to be one of those two first cards that I set down. My first card's going to be one of these two, rather, but not always. I was doing this for someone who I found out just through chatting with him before the performance that he was a lawyer. I played Justice for the first card and it hit immediately. Likewise, if someone seems like they're darker, maybe you think they have some anger in them, you just get that sense, the Devil might be a good card to play. And if someone's really playful, really fun, they might go for the Fool. But it doesn't matter if you're right. I just like to take my very first prediction and set it down based on what I think they're going to guess, and or what I think they're going to relate to someone in their life. And very often it hits and you have a hands-off miracle. So I set down my first card. I'm going to play Strength. And let's say that the spectator plays one that is not Strength. So I see that it's Justice right away. So now I'm going to play my second card. And the first card I always say, match one of these cards to someone in your life. If they're going to play a second card, if I don't hit on the very first card, I always tell them to visualize someone else from your life, but I want you to imagine that person is sitting right over there and really, really visualize that. And the reason I have them solidify that is that I don't want them to confuse them with that first person as they're remembering it. So the second card is someone they're imagining is sitting over there. Now I set down my third card, and they set down their third. Now for the third one, I don't want them to continue thinking of people in their life because they'll eventually forget them. So what I do is I usually do one or two people from their life. I like to do two. And then the third one, I have them imagine themselves at a point in their life. I say, look at the remaining cards. We've all been all of these people. Even the strongest person has been weak. Even the person who's the most good has had moments of evil. Imagine a point in your life where you were represented by one of those remaining three cards, and go ahead and set that card down on top. And they continue to do it. So now, when you get to the reading section, which we'll talk about later, you have three to work with in this case. Two different people from their life, and then a moment from the spectator's past. I set down my first card, and then I set it down, and I instruct the person to set one card down, face down right there. And as they set their card down, I'm looking at my hand of cards, but I'm actually looking past them. Because to read the mark, you don't want to make it obvious, obviously. I think one of the best things to do is to hold up the cards and look underneath them and catch the mark. Now I'm at the point where once they play that, I say, great, you set that down, and boom, I know that it's the Fool, because I can just look quickly and see it. But if you need more time, I think a good gambit is to hold them like a fan of cards. Good. And now I know if I need to continue on or if I can stop there. I can look down, say, good, and then move on. As the spectator deals through the cards, it's very important to remember the order that the cards were dealt in, because when you're doing the reading, you don't want to have to look down and keep looking at the marks to remember which one's which. So, one thing that I do is the first card that I see, I will look at it and I'll say, okay, so that one's the Devil, so I think of the letter D, D for Devil. And then let's say the next one they put down is Empress, E, so that's D-E. And then the one that they put down after that is going to be Fool, F, so that's D-E-F. Deaf, so I'll think of Def Comedy Jam, or something that just locks that in my brain. Now remember, you're only going to need to remember two or three. You're never going to need to remember more than that. But I like to make little words out of them, and that helps me remember. Worst case scenario, if you're performing this, and let's say we've each dealt down 5 cards and you're doing the reading and you panic, you can spread your cards and look at them, but remember that you're playing one behind. That's better than spreading theirs, which gives you the accurate 1, 2, 3 version, but is much more fishy to touch their cards. So the first thing I do is, of course, I show the cards, I pick them up, I give them to the spectators, I have them mix their cards face down. I don't want to look, and then I do whatever mumbo jumbo, hold them up to your heart, hold out your hand, concentrate, good, and I look at them very intensely, and I choose my card, and I set it face down right there. Now, please hold your cards like a poker hand. Don't let me see them, and choose one that represents someone in your life. Actually pair someone in your life to one of those cards, and when you have that person in mind, you have that card, set it face down right here. I'm also very explicit. Set it face down right here, because you don't want the person to set down their card like this. So, outcome number one is that they set down Strength, which is the exact same card that I set down. If that happens, then I pause, I do the reading. We'll get into the reading part later. I do the mind reading part, and then at the very end, the spectator can actually flip these over to show that they match. I noticed that I flipped one over this way and the other over like this. It's because I double-checked the orientation of the mark. So when that happens, you can have the spectator flip them over. You see that they set down exactly what you did. You're golden. I grabbed a close-up mat so that I can sort of pick up the cards really quickly and speed through this. I want to tell you that usually when I perform this, I don't have a close-up pad. I do it on tables most of the time. And I'll show you the difference in handling for the one revelation where it actually matters. This is ending number 2, or option 2. It doesn't come up nearly as often as ending number 1, but you still want to be ready. With option number 1, let's say that I think they're going to put down Strength first. So I play my Strength card. The spectator plays a different card besides Strength. Let's say, in this case, they play the Devil. So I'm looking at my cards. I immediately look down and see that they've chosen the Devil. And so now I'm going to go one behind. So I put down Strength, they put down the Devil. That means I put down the Devil. So next, I set down the Devil on top of mine, and I tell them to think of someone else in their life that they can compare to one of the cards. But this time, I have them imagine that that person's sitting over there in that chair or standing in the corner. Because when the spectator looks back, I want them to remember which person was which. Because they're relating people to each card. I want them to remember that the second card was a different person. I want them to keep it in mind. So that's why I say think of someone in your life for the first card. Second card, I say think of someone else from your life, but imagine that that second person is standing over there by the bar or wherever you are in the room. So I've put down my second card, which is the Devil, to match their first, which is the Devil. And let's say they set down Strength for their second card. So now, essentially what happens is these two cards are the correct cards, but in the wrong orientation. So now, you do the reading. You see that we've completed the circle because the first card you set down has been played. So now you do the reading of the two people. Again, we'll get into the reading later. And now you have to reveal both of these cards. There's a bunch of different ways to do this. This is one of the places that my handling differs from the Arcana version. I'll do it in slow motion so you can see how it works. I'm going to flip these over like that, and then I'm going to flip these over like that. And it looks like I do the same thing, but I'm exchanging the two cards. So one more time, Strength and then the Devil, and then Strength. So I want it to just look like I flip them each over like this. What I do is I pick them up, and this is the handling where a close-up mat does make it easier. I'll show you how to do it without the close-up mat as well, because you have to scoop up the cards. So you can either slide them into your hand like this off the table, which is what I do on a hard table, or you can also do that on the close-up mat. What you're going to do is approach the cards with your thumb underneath and your fingers on top. I'm left-handed, so if you're righty, you can mirror image me. So I go thumb underneath, fingers on top, and I grab the cards like this. And as I rotate forward, my hand turns away from me, I think about the card that ends up on top. So the new top card as I flip them, I think about that going to the left. So I basically drag that to the left. So I pick them up, and I drag that to the left. And now I do the same scooping action, but instead of dragging it to the left, I let go of the new top card and let it slide off of the card. And that displaces the two. One more time. You are here. You pick up, you drag to the left, pick up, and you let that fall. And at speed, it looks more like this. Remember, I set my cards down before you did anything. I'm curious what you picked up. Let's see, you've got the devil in strength. Oh, I set down the same thing. And you can flip over either your cards first or the spectators. That is up to you. Now let's say you don't have the close-up pad. All you do is you slide them off the table and grab them. So again, you don't have the close-up pad, you can't pick them up. You slide off and grab them. Again, as you flip, the top card, new top card gets dragged to the left, and then you can pull these back here, and then the new top card gets slid off the right, like that. I'm now going to explain ending number 5. I'm going out of order intentionally because it's easier to learn it in this order. So we've covered ending 1, ending 2, we're jumping to ending 5. So let's say I start by playing strength, and then the spectator next plays the devil. I read their mark, and so I play for myself the devil, and then let's say they play the empress. So next I read the mark, see that it's empress, so I play the empress. Let's say they next do justice. I read the mark, I see it's justice, I'm playing one behind, so I play justice. And then let's say they do the fool, so I play the fool, and then lastly they finish with strength. This is ending number 5, where they finish with the card that I started with. And the reason you know it's ending number 5 is that the circle is closed on the 5th card. And when I say the circle is closed, I mean that the card that I started with is the card that they finally play. So that circle is closed. So now we're in this position. I have to displace one of my cards. These are in the correct order except for one. So I have to get my bottom card to the top somehow. And there's a bunch of different ways that I do that. I'm going to show you a variety of moves here that you can use at this point in the routine, and you'll utilize them in pretty much every single option except for option 1 and option 2. So starting with option 5, I'm going to teach you my preferred move, what I use 99% of the time I perform this. It's probably 100% of the time now, as well as several other methods, including one that's really, really, really easy, so that you can do this even if sleight of hand isn't your bag. That's not a problem. But the one that I use, even though it might sound hard at first, it's actually much easier to learn than you think, and I'll explain how. So, my preferred method is using a bottom deal. Wait, don't leave. I promise you that the bottom deal in this context is not going to be nearly as hard as it is in any other context. Usually when you're doing a bottom deal, you're talking about cheating at cards or doing a bottom deal as the move. And doing that with a full deck, it's really hard. I rarely do it. But if you do it with a half deck, it's a little bit easier. If you only do it with 5 cards or 3 or 4, suddenly it becomes so much easier. So I'm going to teach you the stud style turnover, which is my preferred bottom deal in this context. I'll also teach you the strike bottom deal, and pick up the cards, relax. If you're scared of the bottom deal, don't worry. I'm going to help you through this. And in the end, when you've practiced a bit and you're still like, you know what, I don't want to do this, there's a few other methods that are really easy, right up your alley. So with ending 5, I now have to get my strength card to the top to match theirs. I'm going to move these out of the way for the sake of clarity. So the stud style turnover looks like this. It's going to look like you deal this card forward. Most bottom deals are like that, but with this bottom deal, it happens as if you're flipping this card over. And I like it because it all happens in one action. So the first thing I do is I thumb off that top card, and I'm going to buckle the bottom card. I'm going to push it out, and then this hand grabs the bottom and rotates it forward. Let's break that down. So I push off that, again, I push off that top card. Underneath, my middle finger contacts usually the corner of that card. That's about where it hits, right there. Or your ring finger can also contact the side. You could also use both fingers at the same time. And you curl these fingers in like this as you make contact with the card. So you kind of apply some pressure with the thumb down and fingers up, and you squeeze those cards like that. And that buckles that bottom card. You'll see that the bottom kind of pops out right over here. That's totally fine. I'm kind of exaggerating the buckle for the sake of you seeing it on camera. So you squeeze, you buckle, and then you unbuckle by opening up your hands by straightening your fingers like that. So again, thumb off the top card, squeeze, buckle, and then unbuckle by extending your finger, and that pushes that bottom card out. One more time, it looks like this. I never push the bottom card out farther than the top card, and you don't want to either. You want to push this card out about halfway, buckle, and extend it just a bit. You really only need to extend it that much, and that gives you the added advantage, and it's enough room for you to grab the card and rotate forward like that. So you've done your push off, your buckle, you extend your finger, the card is here. Once that happens, your thumb comes in the same orientation as ending 2, where you grab the cards like this. It grabs the bottom card, your fingers lay on top, but your thumb of your dealing hand pulls that card back flush on top as the bottom card is rotated forward onto the table. Again, very, very difficult with a full deck of cards, but when you can use the buckle with just a few cards, try it a bunch of times. Just try squeezing that bottom card, just squeeze a little bit and push out. And if you're worried that you're going to bend the cards as you're learning this, you can get 5 bicycle playing cards or your favorite deck, or just get a poop deck, a junk deck, pick them up and start practicing that buckle. When you're learning the bottom deal, you don't need to worry about going fast. In performance, it'll be a relatively fast move. But when you're practicing, just get down the move, work on the fluidity, and then you can add speed as you get more comfortable. I should also point out that the fact that these cards are borderless cards helps hide the bottom deal. And there's also some great misdirection that hides it as well, because you're going to have your spectator turn over the top card, and as they do, all eyes go on that card. And so I push my card over, I say, I want you to flip over the top card, and as they're flipping it over, I do the move. So we start to see that come into play, and then I deal mine forward, and we have a hit. And then once that has happened, every other deal that you do, all of the other cards will appear in the correct order. So it's just that first move, and they're not ready for it. So you've got a lot on your side. The misdirection of their card drawing the eye. You've got the borderless design, which really helps hide the bottom deal. A lot of the ESP cards that are sold as a part of matching card routines have a border design. This is much easier to fly with the bottom deal. And also, they're not ready for it. So you've got a lot in your favor. There is an alternative bottom deal handling that can be done if you don't like the strike, because the strike is a big move. It is a bold move. And if you're interested in using the bottom deal, but the strike, flipping it forward like this, actually scares you, you can also use more of a standard bottom deal. In that case, you would pick up the cards, have the spectator do the same, and at the same time, you and the spectator, you count the cards one at a time to the table. And you instruct them, go ahead, we're going to count our cards one by one to the table. And that's when you do the first bottom deal. And with the first bottom deal, it's just a straight strike bottom, but you can also help yourself off with a similar buckle. Once again, the setup is the same. You push forward, you buckle, you extend, but instead of rotating forward, your hand comes in thumb up, you grab the card, and then you deal the bottom to the table, more like a standard bottom. And then you continue to deal, reversing the order of the cards. So that's another bottom deal option if you're more comfortable with this. The reason I like the strike better is because it cuts out one added process, which is dealing them to the table. And also, I really like the idea of the reveal just happening. You put down the cards, you pick them up, and all we do is we flip them over. To me, that's the better option. But do whatever makes you feel the most comfortable. If you don't want to use the bottom deal, that's okay. Here are 2 other great options. The first was shown to me by my good friend Bob Kohler in the context of this routine. So you're going to pick up your cards off the table, which if you're on a wooden table might mean sliding them off and putting them in your hand, and you instruct your spectator to do so. as your spectator slides their cards off the table, I'm going to take them out of frame just to center this so it's easier for you to see. You lift up your cards and you tell them, pick up your cards and hold them like you're about to deal a game of cards. And you gesture by grabbing the cards out of your dealing hand. So you're holding them in mechanics grip, you grab them and you gesture, and as you come back to your hand, what you're going to do is a block push-off. So you apply pressure with your thumb, you push down, and everything above the bottom card gets slid forward. That's just a block push-off. Pressure here, push forward, everything goes. So you pick up the cards and you say, lift up your cards and hold them like you're going to deal cards. Yeah, just hold them in your hand, and as you come back, you do the block push-off and lift that card up. And as you say that, you say, and pick up the top card. So at speed, it looks like this. So hold the cards like you're about to deal a game of cards. Yeah, pick them up and then flip over the top card. So your spectator's picking up their cards, everyone's watching them. You have no heat on you at this point, because essentially it just looks like you're showing them what to do. Yeah, hold on to them right there and pick up the top card. And if I'm performing for a group, I'll make eye contact with people as I'm doing this. I'm going to instruct her what to do. So pick up the cards, hold them like this. Yeah, hold them in your hand like that. And then lift up the top card in your hand. Now remember, you had a free choice. I want to show you that I put down strength. And then they show their top card. And then once again, you just go through all of the reveals till the end. So that is the option that Bob Kohler came up with. Bob, thanks for that contribution. Pick up, block push off, lift up, and then you can flick it with your thumb if you want to. This other variation my friend Spidey thought of and shared with me, again in the context of this routine. Spidey loves doing this trick, and he wanted a bottom deal-less version, not because he can't do it, he does it very well, but he just thought of this to make it easy. So you pick up the cards, and you're going to recap. So you have them pick up the cards as well. You say, this top card didn't mean anything, this one didn't mean anything, but this card was one that represented you. This was someone you knew. No, this one was also someone you know. And you simply just put that card on top. So once again, you count the cards one at a time in order, and then this one just goes to the top. If you wanted, you could sort of do a Lee Asher sort of reverse spread sort of deal and put it on top like that. That's one option. You could also do what I think is one of the best ways to utilize this idea, and that's you get the rhythm. So you just count through the cards. It looks like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And as you count them, so remember there's just 5 cards here, and you counted these. You could have put them down in any order. It was totally up to you. And because of the rhythm, it just looks like it looks like everything is copacetic. For the sake of completeness, I'll also point out that you can do a double deal, which is similar to a bottom deal where you flip over both of those cards. You show that, they flip over theirs, and you steal that card off the bottom as you set it down. That's another option. If you wanted to, you could steal it in Tenkai Palm, and you could do a Bertram style change on top. But why would you do that? Why? I mean, yeah, do it with cards, it looks great. Don't do it here. My preferred bottom deal, like I said, is the strike bottom like that. I think that's gonna serve you very well, but choose whatever is most comfortable for you. As you deal the cards, you want to make sure that the spectator follows your every action, except for the bottom deal. If your spectator does one of those, then you're in over your head. And if you want some great resources on the bottom deal, of course, The Expert at the Card Table by S.W. Erdenes, great place, and I find Jason England's The Bottom Deal download very helpful. Also, Richard Turner has a DVD called The Cheat that explains the bottom deal in great detail. This is outcome number 4. So let's say I begin by playing Strength, and then the spectator plays the Empress. Working one behind, I now play the Empress, and then they play, let's say they do Justice. So I play Justice, and then they do the Fool. So I do the Fool, and then I see that they have played Strength. So I see that they played Strength, so the circle is complete. That means that this is ending number 4, and here's how you play that. Ending number 4 leaves us each with the same card in our hands. So Once this has happened, I now pause. I do the reading. I talk about the people on the table. I do all of the mind reading. And the final reveal is I say, you dealt these cards in whatever order you wanted. You left yourself with one card. What card did you leave yourself with? They show me the card they're holding, and then I dramatically turn around my last card, and both cards match. And I smile and relax and act like that is the end of the trick. Your spectator reacts. It's not a huge thing. It's just that one at the end. They go, whoa, okay, cool. And I say, but you know what? Wait, hold on one second. And I make sure that the cards are arranged on the table like this, so they're matching over here. I say, but wait a second. Remember, you dealt these cards at any point you'd like. Pick up your cards. And now I continue in the same way that I ended with ending number 5. So once again, I do my buckle. I deal that one over. Since I'm explaining this, I flipped these around. But we're here. I deal that one. The spectator does. And I make sure that they're oriented correctly. And now, after that bottom, we just continue to show that all of these match. So the ending of ending 4 is essentially the same as ending 5, but with one last card. So the only difference is you get that one reveal in the hand, and then you continue just like it's ending 5. Lastly, ending number 3. 3 has 2 sort of variations. So there's really 3A and 3B, but you'll see why in a second. So on option 3, or ending 3, the circle is closed on the 3rd card. So, for instance, I'll start with strength. The spectator plays the Empress. So I play the Empress. So the spectator plays justice. So of course I play justice, and then the spectator plays strength. At this point, they played, once again, they end with the card that I started with, so I know that the circle is complete. At this point, we're each left holding 2 cards that match. When this happens, you move on as follows. Now, I hold my cards like this, and I start moving them back and forth. And I look at them, and then I stop. Now I tell the spectator to do the same. I say, mix up your cards like this, and stop whenever you'd like. And they mix up their cards. Once they've stopped, I look at them as I say, I look at the cards as I say, do you want to change your mind and switch one more time? And that's when I get the read on the mark. Now, they're going to be holding them probably like this, or like this, or like this. But chances are you'll catch the mark on the top of the card. Usually I catch my marks from the bottom, but on ending 3, I catch it from the top. So I do my switches. I say, would you like to switch those one more time? And I just look right at the marks, and you just need one of them. So you just catch one of the marks. Do you want to switch them one more time? And if they do, great. If they don't, great. It doesn't matter. Now, you know which card is which. So these cards sit on the table. I'm going to move them out of the way so that we can just work with what the spectator is holding. So let's say I see that the Fool is over on the same side. So I'm holding these here, the spectator is holding these there. In this case, my reveal is this. I touch the card to the back of the spectator's hand. So their hand is here, and I just tap it, and I say, flip over that card. And in that case, they flip over that card, and I say, yeah, it's like looking in a mirror. And remember, you made all of these decisions. You could have dealt the cards in any order. You could have stopped or switched one more time, but you didn't. Flip over that one. They flip over this one, and then I show that the cards match. Once that has happened, these cards go to the table. They get set down, and I arrange them. Wherever you want, but I like to arrange them sort of like that. And if that's the case, you now end with the rest of the cards being picked up off the table, and then you do the same thing as ending 4 and 5, where you do one bottom, and then you deal the other 2, or use one of the other displacements if you prefer. So ending 3 also ends sort of the same way as 4 and 5, but with the mirror image. Now, let's say you're a spectator, ends with the cards like this, and they don't change their mind. What do? It's not a problem at all. The nice thing is because the nature of reality, my right hand holds the same card as they hold in their right hand, and with their left hand, vice versa. So what I do is if I'm just performing for one person, I just say to them, remember, these are in our hands. So imagine someone's holding those. I'm holding these. Now what I do is I say, remember, all these choices were up to you. You go over how open and fair it was. Now I did something. I'm left-handed myself, or you could say you're right-handed. I'm left-handed myself, and I kept the devil in my left hand. And I deal that card to the table, and I look at them and I say, and I smile confidently, and I say, what card did you leave in your left hand? And then they flip over that card, and of course they match. And of course, the other one, it could be any one of the 5, but in my right hand, I left the Fool. What did you leave in your right hand? The Fool. And once again, they match. This option used to make me a little uncomfortable. I was so worried. I thought the mirror image was better, and I realized that it was just me being in my own head. Now that I'm comfortable with it, all you have to do is say it confidently, and it totally flies. It's just as fooling as every other method. If there are other people here, instead of just saying what was in your right hand, what was in your left hand, oftentimes what I will do is, if there are others, I'll say to the person, in my right hand, I put the Fool, and I turn to the rest of the audience and I show them the Fool. Show everyone what you had in your right hand. And now that person will show their right hand, and now it's kind of this copacetic thing. It's not a mirror image, but we're each holding them with our right hand, and when we're both facing the same direction towards the audience, it looks more uniform. And then in my left hand, I kept the devil. Show everyone what you had in your left hand. And now, both of us standing here holding the cards like this to the audience, it looks great. So there you go. Those are the 2 different options for ending number 3. The key moment in the routine that informs you, the performer, which ending you will use is whenever the spectator plays the card that you started with. So in other words, if I start with strength, whenever I see the spectator play strength, that's when the circle is closed, and that's when you know what ending you have. How many phases of this routine should you do? That's up to you. I often like to do 2, but it kind of depends on the situation. So let's say I set down strength, and they play strength, and it's a perfect hit. Then I'll say, let's try it again. Or, would you like to try it again? This time we'll do it a little differently. And I use that phrase, let's do it a little differently, because now if the reveals are different, it allows that to happen. I say, remember I told you we do this a little differently. This time I want you to add a second card, and and this time do this. That way the process being different is totally explained. But oftentimes I'll set down a single little hit, I'll say let's do it again, and then I set down another single, and then that one hits as well. So both phases look the same. Then I'll say, I told you we would do this a little differently, and we will. This time, hold out your hand. And now I talk them through some procedure for the mind reading to explain the fact that I said, let's do it differently. The only time you have to be concerned about repeating this is when you get into the ending 3 territory. And the reason for this is you don't want to get into a situation where you do the mirror image one or the right-handed, left-handed gambit one after another, because that'll be obvious. So if I'm ever performing, I do one phase and it's 3, I know that if I'm going to do it again and I get to that point, I might just, instead of doing the other gambit and have it be correct, I might just take the hit and be like, I thought you were going to switch it one more time, but the 2 cards are right, aren't they right? They were still right. And then I deal through the other ones and we still get that ending. Oftentimes, though, with ending 3, you've got 3 reading cards in play, so the routine is often long enough that you don't have to do another phase. But, once again, if you want to do sort of a rapid-fire version of this, you can just do one phase, do a couple quick reveals, show that they match, do it one more time, a couple quick reveals, and then boom, you've just fried their brains. My preferred way to do this trick is in a formal close-up environment or in a walk-around. That's the way I do it the most. But I've also done it on stage. I've done it with a camera and a live video projection in front of 1,000 people. And I've also done it in parlor situations. If you're working a stand-up or parlor situation, you want to include this trick, here's how you do it. Get 2 wine glasses that fit the size of the tarot cards, and what you do is you're going to essentially use the wine glass just like you would the table. So I angle my card as it goes in, so the spectator blocked is standing over here and I'm over here. So you don't want the spectator to see which card you put down, but of course you don't want the audience to as well. So I angle mine this way, and I tell them, I instruct them very carefully to put their card in just the same, angled away from me so I can't see it. It's okay if the audience sees theirs, of course. So I just say, make sure it's angled away from me so I can't see it. So it might not be perfect, it might be here, doesn't matter. Same thing, I see the marks, and so I put mine on top of it. And then you have to be careful in this circumstance to instruct them. When they're going to set down their next card, make sure that they set it down on top of their card. So make sure that they put it on top, great. And then you continue to do this, and same thing, you could end with any outcome, it doesn't matter. In the end, when you do the reveal, I played with 2 different things. I played with just doing the bottom deal like this, by lifting up. And if you're far enough away from the audience, this totally works. So once you get to this position, I thank the spectator for their help. I ask them to return to their seat, and then I turn them like this, and I look and I smile. So if the audience is far enough away, you can just lift yours off the bottom and theirs off the top. But that makes me a little uncomfortable, so what I do much more often is this. I hold them in my hand, I keep the spectator on stage, and I just do the bottom deal forward like this and show it to everyone, and I ask them to do the same. I say, lift up the top card. Just lift up the top card, and I want you to show everyone. Boom. Then this goes into the glass. So they lift up. I wasn't keeping the cards in order as I did this. They just show that card, and now you just one by one deal and reveal the cards as they do the same, and then you end, and you can end in this nice position. So that's how to do it if you're working stand up and you want to use a table with wine glasses. I perform this routine walk around all of the time, because often in walk around scenarios there's a cocktail table or there's a table that people are standing around, and I just perform this right to the table. If you want to perform this walk around where you don't have a table, it's certainly possible. It's not my first choice, I'll be honest. I think it's much easier to do this routine when you have a table. But if you want to do a walk around, I've totally played with it, and it definitely works. If people are wearing formal clothes and you have a man with a breast pocket, you can have them use their breast pocket. If not, you can use people's pants pockets. So I take the first one, I look at it, I look at them, and I tuck that into my pants pocket, or my breast pocket if it's up here. The spectator, now I have them take out one card that represents someone in their life, and I want them to take it out, and I have them look at it and really focus on it. And when they do that, I catch the mark, because in this context, I have to catch the mark early, because it might be harder when it goes into the pocket. So mine goes into the pocket, then they do the same. They tuck it into their breast pocket, but still sticking out, or they tuck it into their pants pocket, but still sticking out. Next, I take my second one, and I tuck it in, and you instruct them, again, put it in on top. They do the same. You continue to do this. When it's time for the reveals, you do the revelations, then you take the cards out of your pocket. You have one other spectator hold out their hands like this, and I deal my cards into one of their hands and instruct the spectator to flip over their cards into that person's other hand. So I do my bottom, I reveal the card, and I set that down in this person's outstretched hand. They flip over their first one, and then we continue dealing, and we get the ending. That's how you do it if you want to do the routine walk around with no table. It's also possible, I should mention, to catch a glimpse on the mark while they're in their pocket. So you can make sure that they're up far enough, but it's much harder to get a glimpse at the person's pocket than when they're holding it. So if you're doing this without a table, I recommend doing the aforementioned. Let's get into the meat of this trick, revealing information about people. I used to be scared of any sort of reading system like cold reading. Normally you start with general information, and when it seems like it's working, you narrow the field and get closer. I was scared I was going to get something wrong and it was all going to go awry. One of the wonderful things about this routine is that you have hot information about the people that the spectator is thinking of. By playing each card, they've told you a great deal of information because they thought of someone who's represented by the Empress. Well, immediately you know a lot about this person. So no matter what you say, even if you get something wrong or go in a direction that doesn't feel right, you can always come back to just making generalizations based on the card that was played, and you know that you have guaranteed hits built in. It's this great safety mechanism built into the trick. That's why every time I perform this, I do so with so much confidence, because I know that even if my guesses are really specific and wrong, I can go right back to the lifeline of knowing what their card is and describing the basics that will hit pretty much every time. Another great thing is that people tend to think of the same types of people for each card. That's what I'd like to talk about right now. So, when someone chooses strength to represent someone, it is usually a family member, or it could be a friend. Now, strength is either going to mean emotional or physical strength. In most cases, I find that emotional strength is what someone's comparing to. So if someone plays the strength card, usually the person they're thinking of has overcome something big or has really been there for them in a big way. Now, let's say your spectator is really buff and looks like they hit the gym all of the time. Maybe they're kind of bro-y. They might be more likely to use strength to represent someone who is, physically strong. But generally speaking, strength is usually emotional strength. It could be power, though. So as you start your reading, you can start describing this person as if they're emotionally very strong. And if the spectator doesn't look like you're correct, you start to pick up on these little cues, like, they nod a little bit if you're right, they kind of freeze up a little bit, usually if you're wrong, or get a little tense. And as you perform this more, you sort of get good at picking up on these things. So if you start to go in one direction, like this person has overcome a lot in their life, and they look like you might not be right, you say, and I say this because they're is this person are they in really good shape? You can get there quickly if you want to, or dance around it before you get there. But during the reading, you can steer it in one direction or another. So strength, oftentimes a family member, someone who's helped them through something. It could also be a very, very close friend. Now, the Empress is the other card that is played very often as the first card. So, like I said, my first card is going to be Strength or the Empress. The Empress is going to be a woman. I know that's shocking, but that's a great piece of information. If you know that this card is played, it's going to be someone who identifies as more female, has more of a female tone. There you go. Great information. It is oftentimes a mother. I think that one's the most common. Sometimes it is a best girlfriend if I'm performing for a woman. And if I'm performing for a guy and they're straight, oftentimes it'll be their girlfriend or their wife. If I'm performing for a woman and she is not straight, oftentimes this will be her girlfriend or her wife. So keep in mind that this could be a romantic partner. Strength could as well, depending on the person. But know that the Empress is going to oftentimes be family. If you think it might be the wife, don't launch into saying, have you been sexually active with this person? Because if that person is thinking of their mother, it's not going to go over well. Just saying. So these two cards are played most often as the first ones. Let's say the Devil is played. The Devil and the Fool are the more negative card. Let's say the Devil is played. The Devil, I find, is usually an ex. Now, maybe it's someone that the person's arguing with at work. Maybe it's someone that they hate. Maybe a famous politician that they hate. It could be that. But I find that the most common one of the hundreds, if not thousands of times I've performed this trick, the devil is an ex-girlfriend, ex-boyfriend, ex-husband, ex-wife. So sometimes I'll just take a stab at that, and it hits very often. The fool is usually a friend or family member. I find that a friend from college hits pretty often. I find that a brother or family member, they often think of as the fool. The reason why family comes up with the fool is that it's someone that is still in your life, does foolish things, but you can't get rid of your family. They're still kind of there. So a person in your life, if they're super foolish, you might not keep them around, but your family is always going to be there. Justice is the least common card used. I find that it comes up the least. But when it does come up, it's usually just someone who has a really strong moral compass. And that's a line that you can certainly use to have it hit, because no one's going to play the justice card on someone who has a bad moral compass. It's just not going to happen. So yeah, that's kind of the overview for the trends of who comes up. Another important point, though, and this should not be overlooked, is that when you're performing this for someone and they are there with their partner or their friend or their family or people that they know, I find that oftentimes, if I'm performing for someone and they're with one other person, they're going to use that other person as one of those cards. Whether or not they want them to see them as thinking of them in that moment, or whether or not they spend that much time with that person, I don't know. Doesn't matter. I find that if I'm performing this for two people, I'm going to assume that this person is going to be used somewhere in the game. So, in other words, if I'm performing this for a woman and her boyfriend, and she plays the strength card, I'm not going to immediately go to the boyfriend, but I'm going to start to steer in that direction, and there's a very, very strong likelihood that I'll be correct. When you're revealing the information, if you don't have experience in mentalism, when you first just start out, it's going to be maybe a little difficult not to just go straight to describing the card, obviously. So, for instance, let's say they've played the Empress. You don't want to start with saying, I'm getting the sense that this woman is, right? Or you don't even want to say, I'm getting the sense that this person has a female presence. You're going directly to it too quickly. You want to dance around the card. You want to try to describe the person without actually revealing that you think that this is a woman. The fact that you know it's a woman is a big moment. I never actually say during my reveals, oh, this is the Empress. I would say once in a while there's an exception to that rule. Once in a while I'll say this person has a great deal of emotional fortitude. Is that right? Oh, that's why you think of them as a powerful person. And I might say powerful for strength towards the end of the reveal. But in general, you don't want to give up that you know what they put down too early. You want to kind of dance around it. I would also like to point out that I'm a big fan of taking wild guesses. Sometimes they hit, sometimes they don't. We'll talk about that more later, but I think it's important to try to start physically describing the person, making smart decisions based on your knowledge. So for instance, if I'm performing for a guy and he's played the Empress, I'm going to guess on average, based on what I know about people, that the person that I'm describing is shorter than he is. I don't know that, but I think it's a reasonable guess. Likewise, if they played the devil, you don't know for a fact that they got into a screaming argument at one point, but it's very, very possible. So use the information that you have to make accurate guesses. And the more and more you do this, the better and better you get at it. And when you first start out, you still have the lifeline of just describing around the person to get real, concrete revelations that hit perfectly every time. I've learned that it's important to tell the spectators to hold the cards like a poker hand. They understand what that analogy means. Otherwise, they might show them to you accidentally, and then you have to have them mix them up again. It's a good idea to turn away when your spectator is shuffling the cards before the routine really starts. And the reason for that is you don't want them to have the possible explanation that you tracked where they were shuffling. So that's why I always turn around when the spectator is shuffling. This one's very important. Instruct the spectator to set the card down right there face down and show them where to put it. And then, even more importantly, when they deal down their second card, make sure you instruct them to deal it on top of this one. You can even touch it, and you say, when you set down another card and set it down on top of this one. Because a lot of the times the spectator will set it right there if you don't do that, and then the cards are out of order, you sort of lose the flow of it. So I always make sure that I say, and set it right on top. That's important. Another thing I've learned, just as important as it is for you as the magician to sort of read the body language of the spectators you're doing the reading, you also want them to read your body language in a way. And when I say that, I mean it's important that you're confident as you do this routine. So when I set down my card and then they set one down, I want to project the air of confidence that I already know that they match. Even though they don't know what's going to happen yet, I want to stay relaxed and confident. So I smile, maintain eye contact. A smile with intense eye contact I credit to Paul V. Hill. With the second one, same thing. I set it down, they set one down, and then you can look a little relieved, or you can look confident and smile. But I think it's very important to project that image to them as you do the routine. If you're wondering how to tell whether the spectator is going to prefer the red ones or the blue ones, that's actually really simple. You just watch their eyes. So I give them the option. I say you can either pick up the red cards or the blue cards. And then I watch their eyes, and they usually go from one to another. And the most recent one they go to, so if they start on red and go to the blue, I'll make eye contact with them and say, you know what? I think you prefer the blue ones, because that's the most recent one that they looked at. Or if they go back and forth, whatever one they land on, I think that's going to be the preferred one. But I'll say you changed your mind. So if they go red, blue, red, I'll say, you know what, I think you were thinking about the blue ones, but you changed your mind and you went with the red ones. And it hits most of the time. If it doesn't and they say no, you say, you struck me as more of a red kind of person. You shrug it off. It's just not part of the effect. But if you get the hit, which you usually will, then of course it's part of the routine. There's, of course, tons of other tricks that you can do with these cards. You can apply them to any other marked card packet effect or ESP Zener card routine. One that Max Maven showed me, and he doesn't remember the origin. This is very clever. So you look at the 4 cards and you place one into your lap and you ask the spectator to do the same. And then you kind of like lean on the table and you just steal that one back into your hand. So as they look down, you feed that back into your hand. But you don't even need to make a big thing of it. This one can even go below the table and you can stick it in right here so it's out of view. Now, they take one out, and I ask them to hold it up and look at it. They hold it up, you get a glimpse of the mark. And the moment that that happens, you know which one you're going to lap. Then all you have to do is lap that card, and then the reveal is you set those down aside, you say, look, you could have put anyone in your lap, and we each show the single card. When I do that, I like to put them in an order so I don't have to look at them. So I always do Strength, the Fool, Empress, Devil, and then Justice. And the reason I do this order is my memory technique is the San Francisco woman is a DJ. So Strength is S, Fool is F, the Empress is a woman, and the Devil is D, and Justice is J. So SF, San Francisco woman, is a DJ. Devil, Justice, DJ. So I remember that. So that way, when I just stick the Justice into my lap, and then I replace it back into the packet. I see which one they take. Once they put that in there, I can say, now remember, we each have 4 cards in our hands, and now all I have to do is spread over the one that I want to lap, and then I lap it. And the way I do that is I just kind of put my hands together, and I push it out like that. So let's say I want to lap the Devil. I just push that one out, and just feed it into my lap as I talk to them. And then that just falls into my lap. Or you can use any other lapping technique. And then you do your reveal. One other bonus trick, I don't do this one very often, but I have, and people like it, is I say we have 2 sets of cards. We have these 5, and then this 5, all of these cards are the same. So I ask them to look through them and to choose any card they want and set it face down. So it doesn't matter. Let's say they set down Justice. So what I have is I know my order, so I remember where Justice is. Now I move Justice to the bottom, and I'm going to do a variation on the frustration count. I should mention that before they do this, I show all of their cards like this. I keep them in dealer's grip. My thumb goes on this opposite corner. I rotate the cards like this. So they come up and I rotate them. And as I do that, so they start face up, as I do that, I show Justice and I peel it off, the Empress, I peel it off, the Fool, I peel it off, Strength, and then the Devil. So I give them to them, I let them take one out and set it face down. So again, we decided that Justice was going to be face down. So I move Justice to the bottom. Now I do the same count, but I start face down. So when I do it face down, and I do that same count, it looks like you have 5 of Justice. Let me get set up. So you're face down, you check the mark, you see that it's Justice, and now you say, and remember, I told you I had 5 matching cards. All of these are Justice. I want to see which one you set down. And then you show that it matches. So that's just another variation, but of course I encourage you to think of your own as well. I think the police are coming for me. I'm gonna go. As a part of this project, I'm very excited to share with you a talk I had with a very close friend. Luke Germain and I became friends in our early 20s when we lived in Las Vegas. Luke is one of the greatest mind readers alive. I'm not breaking any new ground saying that. And Luke uses tarot cards in his show every single night. He revealed some really cool, interesting insights that I think are going to take your performance to the next level. So enjoy this talk I had with Luke Germain. Luke is here because even though I've been doing this trick for quite some time and have done it for tons and tons of people, he has more experience than me doing readings with tarot.
Yeah, well, I think probably what's interesting, and hopefully will be interesting to you guys in our conversation, is the fact that we work with 2 very different styles. So you're predominantly a comedy stand-up magician.
Absolutely.
So for a lot of people that know, maybe have seen your shows, touring, colleges, cruises, theatres, comedy festivals, this might be a surprising thing for them to see coming from you based on your character on stage.
Yeah.
But I think this is a kind of interesting area to talk about because there aren't many routines in magic and mentalism that could be of real value to somebody like me that works in a kind of very heavy psychic style and somebody that works in a lighter-hearted kind of, satirical style. So my first question is, because the obvious assumption would be that as a comedy magician, your choice would be to make this kind of trivial. It would be to say like, oh, tarot cards are silly and they're not real, and but that's not what you do with a performance. You take this really quite, I don't want to say seriously, because that makes it sound like it's not fun, which it is definitely a fun experience to be involved in, but you hold it with some reverence when you perform the routine. It's not just being used as a kind of vehicle for gags.
Sure. Well, my thing has always been on stage, funny, in person, strong.
Okay, interesting.
So I do have jokes in this, and I riff with people when I'm performing this, and I make it more lighthearted and fun than it certainly is going to be in a lot of people's hands.
Yeah.
But this does take a level of seriousness because I think it deserves the level of seriousness.
I completely agree.
And it has the inherent value when people see these. It sort of changes the temperature in the room a little bit.
Right,
it allows me to take that little dip and people come along with me.
For sure. And when you're doing this routine, so that rule of kind of funny on stage, strong off stage, it's an interesting way of looking at things. So let's say I've seen you do kind of a stand-up show, an hour-long comedy magic show. And also I think it's unfair to say that you're funny on stage and strong off, because that somehow is suggesting that the magic that you do on stage isn't strong, which is absolutely very strong. But there is definitely a change of tone between these two things. So would you do this off stage after an evening? Like, let's say there was like the one more thing that you had to do for someone.
Yes.
Would this be the kind of thing that you would go to?
Absolutely. Not only would it be, it is.
Okay, great.
100%. Because it's the perfect thing for me, anyway, after doing a stage show, when everyone's gathered around and I can just say, you know what? I wouldn't normally do this with people, but I happen to have these. Right. And then it just creates this interesting feel.
Yeah, fantastic. So it shows them a kind of different side or a depth, maybe, that they wouldn't expect.
Sure.
And that in and of itself is kind of exciting.
Absolutely. And then also in a walk-around environment, obviously the best handling of this uses a table, and I make use of that. But I always have these with me when I'm doing walk-around, and definitely a formal close-up show. But if there is a table walk-around, it is something that you can start off with doing a walk-around set if you're doing more of, something with more of a mental flavor. Right. Because you can show up, you can just do this and maybe one billet routine and walk away as a mind reader, and it's great.
Sure. One of the interesting things I think about tarot is that as soon as you introduce a tarot card, it doesn't really matter if moments earlier you were a balloon modeler. or doing a kids' magic show, the minute the tarot cards come out, people are like, oh, we can read tarot too.
Sure.
So that conversation that often happens in mentalism about like, oh, do you mix magic and mentalism? For some reason, because tarot cards are so sort of ingrained in our understanding of culture, and that we know that there are people that have studied these images and know their meanings, it doesn't seem to be any level of exclusivity between magic, as I would call it, you know,
Sure.
making things float, making things appear and vanish, balls of fire, and then bringing these out. It's just kind of accepted that, okay, well, he's a magical person, he probably knows how to read tarot cards.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because it might be more challenging to go directly from magic into like a really strong billet sequence, but simply because of the objects that are in play.
Right.
You know, if you went into a billet sequence, maybe the audience would be sat there thinking to themselves, oh, I wonder if he's swapping those papers, if they'd seen you do some, you know, amazing coin routine or something.
Sure.
But the cards that you mentioned, like, they change the temperature. Well, yeah, they certainly do, because they have so many connotations, and those connotations are different based on every culture in the world. But not only that, they exist in their own universe that is highly credible. So my suggestion would be, like, if you're in a similar situation to Ben, where your predominant performance mode is one of magic, visual magic and comedy and all of that kind of stuff, or mental magic maybe, a mixture of it all, this could be an excellent piece to transition between that style, doing this trick, and then maybe the one super heavy mind reading trick, because this kind of acts as a bridge between the two worlds.
Yes.
And that's entirely thanks to the props. It's not often
you get it as a freebie.
Yeah. So that was the first kind of observation that I think could be useful.
Yeah, it's worth noting too that one of the reasons that this came about was long ago I was doing a corporate event, and I was doing a formal close-up show, and also at the event was a tarot reader. In the other room. It was opposite sides, and I quickly
So no one
noticed.
wanted to see you.
Quickly noticed, long line to see the tarot reader, and then almost nothing. And then, of course, once I started doing a couple of sets, then that leveled out, and then I ended up taking everyone from them. But it also made me think, like,
took the tarot
I
reader
took
down.
the whole line. I just grabbed them with magic, which sounds disgusting. But I quickly noticed, I was like, oh, there's something about this. This was years and years and years ago, and I just started thinking, what is my transitional piece which can give it that feel in that environment? And then, of course, it became something so much more that I use all of the time.
Right.
But it also, the intrigue of these things, it's real. And there is something very magical feeling about it. It's not like if you take out any other magical prop, like you take out a sponge ball, it doesn't carry, you might think like, oh, okay, magic, but you don't think magic.
Mystery.
Right.
Yeah. No, these the kind of esoteric, deeply mysterious imagery that are on the cards. And I'll talk a little bit about the way that I tend to introduce tarot cards to people. Because tarot cards have this interesting place in culture, which is everybody knows something about them, but not everybody really knows a lot about them.
Sure.
If that makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
So everybody knows that they're kind of spooky or old, or maybe a cult, maybe the work of the devil. They're not really sure, unless they've studied a bit more. So the first question that I think is worth asking is the selection of the cards, because obviously you've taken cards from the Major Arcana.
Yep.
But we have two sets of 5 that are matching, so obviously we can do the matchup.
Yep.
But why these 5?
So there's a lot of reasons that, and I probably will have spoken about this in other contexts on this project, but I wanted sort of guaranteed hits. I wanted to increase my likelihood that I would hit right off the bat and have a hands-off miracle. And by having these 2 very powerful cards perceived by people who aren't familiar with the tarot, which is most people.
This is the real question, right?
Sure.
So you're selecting these based on not necessarily the deep-rooted historical, divination meaning, but rather the impact they'll have on a normal spectator.
Sure, which is almost everyone I've performed this for.
Yeah,
in fact, the people who have had a very different relationship with it, you can tell immediately.
Yeah, oh, for sure. Yeah.
Because as soon as you bring these out, their body language, they get excited, they start talking about them. They'll do your job for you. But for most people who don't have a familiarity with these, but recognize them, they're going to see Strength and the Empress as being these 2 positive cards, whereas the Devil and the Fool are more negative.
And also aesthetically, Strength and the Empress is more attractive to most people than, say, the Devil. This kind of weird sort of Orson Welles with a devil head image, you know,
Right.
like that's who I think of when I think of the devil as Orson Welles. When I look at this tarot card, I imagine that the devil card has the voice of Orson Welles. But anyway, yeah, so the cards have been selected specifically for the impact, visual, and also through the name of the card itself carrying a communication, obviously it's a
Right.
word, but specifically for the impact that will have on normal people, not on tarot experts.
Yes, which is one of the things that we're going to get into specifically because you're here. But when I ask someone to pair one of the cards to someone in their life, they're so much more likely to choose Strength or the Empress,
Of course.
than anything else. And that's, of course, a piece they forget by the reveals. By the end, they just think, I had a free choice of anything.
Right.
But, you know, you're going to have someone who wants in front of their friends or even in front of you has the social pressure to say, oh, yeah, someone in my life is strong. I don't have people in my life who are like the devil.
Yeah.
But there are the exceptions to that rule. And
Well,
you can see the person and you can say, I bet this is a person who's going to set down the devil first.
Right. And of course, the exception only makes that moment more powerful in performance, because if you do say, I want you to match a person from your own life with one of these cards, and you see that the devil has gone down, well, you know, maybe that person's going through some pretty heavy stuff, right? And that is a good piece of information to know. So the exception to the rule, as it were, actually is going to tell you a vast amount as well.
Absolutely.
So one of the things that I think is worth mentioning from the way that I handle tarot is... I thought about this for a long time, because tarot cards are simultaneously beautiful and mysterious and engaging, and I think they're charismatic in a strange way. Even though they're an inanimate object, I think they have charisma about them. The challenge for a lot of magicians working with tarot is that there will be people that know a lot more about tarot cards than the magician, and I include myself in that. You know, like I'm very deeply interested and connected to tarot cards, and I've used them for, you know, most of my life, but my primary passion is mentalism, right? Like the majority of my exploration, thinking, thought, energy, creative effort goes into mentalism. Well, there is another version of me in one of the many alternative realities or Elon Musk simulations or whatever we're in, that's flipped.
Sure.
So there's a version of me that could absolutely call me, the real me, out on my tarot knowledge, because that guy has spent the same amount of effort that I've put into mentalism, but only focused on tarot.
Right.
So this isn't being said to try and scare anybody away from using them, but what it is being said for is to try and keep in mind that when you meet those people, you need some kind of, I think of it as a parachute. I need some way that my interpretations of the tarot are unique to me on an intuitive level, so that I can't be in a situation where, let's do it crazy for a second, right? Let's say that I haven't even bothered to learn the Cliff Note versions of the cards. It's I'm just making it up.
Sure.
And
like level one, as in I'm just going to describe what's on the card, basically.
Yeah. So, but let's say I see the Fool as a card, and I choose to interpret that to be, you know, a stupid person who makes bad choices, right? Which I suppose you could, based on the fact that it's a fool, but that isn't the true meaning of the Fool. If I was to say that in performance, the expert is going to say, like, well, hold on a minute. You know, I've got about 750 years worth of history that says you are wrong.
Yeah.
And now kind of everything's busted.
Sure.
Right? Because you're just being put in that position. So the way that I tend to work with the tarot in all contexts is to introduce the cards. I'll say, I bring with me some images from the tarot. No one really knows where they came from. Some people think they were born under the ancient sun in Egypt to a pharaoh who used the cards to control her people. Some people think they were created by the devil himself. I can tell you that's not true, but what I can tell you is that you're already an expert in reading these, even if you've never seen them before. Because philosophers worked out that the tarot is actually a perfect visual interpretation of the human condition. So on a very deep archetypal level, when you look at these images, it speaks and connects to you. So you don't have to read hundreds of books on tarot. You just need to open your eyes to them. So as you look at them, one of them will draw your attention to it. That's the one that, for whatever reason, is connected to you at this moment in your life. So what we'll do together today is explore these cards. Now, I can tell you this, even if exactly the same card came up tomorrow with a different tarot card reader, you wouldn't get the same information, because I work not just with the traditions, but with my intuition. The final thing, I never read a tarot card reversed, because in the tradition, if the card is reversed, it means something bad. Today, we will only find good things. So that's my general, like, said it 60 million times in my life intro, which obviously isn't perfect for this trick, but that's how I introduce a full deck of tarot. But the whole point that I want to make there is that if you choose to perform this trick, it's probably wise to find your own version of the parachute, just so you can't be called out, because it would be just so horrible for the quality of the trick that you get right up to this great matchup and then a guy wants to be like, well, actually, in the Pamela Coleman Smith artwork versus the Dodal, the Coleman it would just ruin everything. So,
Sure.
so one small parachute is going to make a huge difference.
Yeah, it's a very, very good point. I should note that in my performance of this, I've come across that person so seldom that
I'm
it's
sure, yeah.
that's just worth noting. What you said is 100% right.
Yeah.
You should be ready. But also understand that if you find that person, it is your job as the performer to gain that information before you go into the routine.
Right. Well, and the other thing is that it's about context, right? So very often in the promotional artwork for my shows, there is a tarot card. And that, if you have a promotional photograph with a tarot card involved, essentially what you're doing is putting a magnet into the world for people that are interested in that thing
Sure.
to come and find you. So in my experiences, I often get a lot of people that know a lot about these things, but that's because my context is different. I'm doing
Yeah.
a kind of psychic-y show that these people would be drawn to.
Right.
Whereas if you're coming to, the sort of ultra hip new wave comedy magic show, maybe that's gonna, well, not maybe, conclusively that will lessen the number of those people in the room.
Sure, and my weigh-in is often, I don't even really understand these.
That's fantastic.
I just found them, and there's
fantastic.
something magical about
It's fantastic. You know, one of the great things about the tarot is that, there are hundreds and hundreds of years of tradition about how you read tarot, but everybody's got their own way. So just because it's old doesn't mean it's right.
Yeah.
Right? This is true of most divination systems, is that we have simply inherited systems that are really, really old. And because they're old, they carry the weight of history, which gives them the facade of accuracy. It's just old. Doesn't
Yeah.
mean it's right.
Yeah.
I'd rather drive a car than ride a horse. The horse is older way of moving around, right?
Sure.
But so the fact is that you can absolutely do what you said, which is, I'm not sure I really understand these. There's just something about them that's really intriguing to me.
Boom, and then you're in.
Right?
Yeah.
And now you're not making the claim.
Yes.
Which is the important thing, because if you go into that scenario where you're claiming to be an expert on this tool,
Right.
now basically
You can get called out.
Yeah.
You're putting yourself at great risk.
Yeah.
Whereas if you explore it in an honest way, then
Right.
suddenly you're safe.
Well, that's your parachute now, right?
Sure.
The parachute is literally making a feature of the fact that you don't know what they mean.
Yeah.
So it's all different for all different performers, but I do think it's worth just considering how you're going to introduce these magical objects.
Yeah, what they are to you.
And there's
100%.
other considerations as well. For example, we could go and get some coffee beans and some, a lighter and start aging these to make them look super mysterious and, just do it well so it doesn't look like a sort of Halloween prank or something. There's nothing worse than a bizarre magician with a plastic skull next to him trying to convince you he's,
Should I take that out of my...
I think so, yeah. Like, if the act is a bizarre magician trying to convince me that he sold his soul to the devil and the proof is a Halloween plastic skull, I'm not so sure.
Yeah.
So, but the consideration of having them as being kind of modern, and I think it's worth talking about your choice to recolor them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So the rider weight sets, of course, they vary. We were talking about this. They're all different. But generally speaking, you're going to get the same or similar background on most of these cards. It's going to be this sort of bright yellow card. And it was important for me that these would pop immediately when the reveals happen, so that even if someone was farther back and kind of watching, not a part of the group you're performing for, but watching, they could still see these two cards and immediately see that they match. So everything makes sense. And I also wanted them not just to see that they match. I wanted them to feel like they are. The strength was the yellow card, and I think having this red color pops much more. I think that really helps in the effectiveness of making someone see this and go, oh, I would compare this to someone strong.
Right. Yeah, and of course, so yeah, on aesthetic level, that makes perfect sense. But there's, as you've mentioned, there's a huge practical advantage of this, which is that as I spread these 5 cards in my hands, there is great contrast between each of them. I'm looking at a card with a bright yellow background, then I'm looking at a card with a kind of salmon-coloured background, then I see one that's predominantly light blues, then darker, and then the devil's got black in it. So when we come to that reveal, as you say, it's just an immediate connection that there's no struggle to see. So you recolored these.
Yes, and in my notes I wrote, because of the colors, a child could understand this routine.
Right.
But if you're performing this for children, you probably make bad decisions.
Well, or the best decisions.
Yeah, depending on
Your
who the
choice.
child is.
Yeah. So an interesting thing is, so you've recolored the faces. This is the Pamela Coleman Smith artwork from the reworking of the Rider-Waite that then went via Aleister Crowley and the School of Thelma. So you kept that artwork, you've recolored it, and then the back design, this is a modern back design. So this isn't the back design that was with Pamela Coleman Smith's deck. She had something called the tea leaf back design that kind of looked like somebody had smudged some coffee all over it. This is the back design that sort of began actually in America with US Games and Ink. They started using this style back design. Yeah. And I'm assuming the reason for this choice is that this is the most common back design. If I go into like a Barnes & Noble,
yeah.
It doesn't exist anymore, does it, Barnes & Noble?
I think there might be, well, it depends on when this comes out.
Right. I think there's 2 left while we're filming.
And there's
but they
one
could close in before we stop.
There's one lonely guy drinking coffee, sitting there, just holding books, just clutching them.
He's got a lot of
onto
CDs, but nothing to play them on.
There's multiple reasons.
Yeah.
One is because, yes, this is going to be recognizable if you were to buy one of these decks in
so
the US.
If I go into a bookstore and I get that kind of, Tarot 101 that's a book and a deck, it's highly likely that's the back I'm going to have seen.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then, of course, for the primary primary move in one of the outs is that this back design covers that beautifully. So if there was going to be a border and you were doing a double deal or a bottom deal, you would be at a greater disadvantage, which with a lot of the matching routines that have come out recently, they have they're bordered cards, and you're putting yourself at risk for that. I wanted this to be as seamless as possible, and because although I am familiar with the bottom deal and I've used it, I didn't use it in a professional setting all that much. So when I first started doing this, I was nervous, and I was like, I want to make sure that I give myself every possible advantage that there is. Yeah. And I've even taught this to someone who doesn't really do the bottom deal and doesn't feel comfortable doing it, and they still, because of the misdirection of the moment and because of the back design, can literally do a terrible bottom deal and still get away with it. I don't recommend that. You should get as good as you possibly can at all of the tools in your toolbox, but it does give you an added advantage.
Well, one of the ways that you get as good as you can possibly be at doing anything is to make it as easy as it can possibly be for you to do. Right? There's no point making a deceptive technique more difficult than it needs to be simply for the sake of making it difficult.
Sure, and the more comfortable you are with it, of course, then the better you're going to be at getting good at it quickly.
You absolutely get kind of double bonus here, which is these are recognizable by anyone that has ever bought a deck of tarot cards in their life, because this is normally what you start with, and the borderless back design is very helpful when it comes to doing a move like a bottom deal or a double deal.
Sure.
So that was the choice of the backs.
Yeah.
And then presumably the third advantage is that this back is very deceptive to hide the marks.
100%. These, and I've shown these to skeptical people. I gave them to a friend who thinks in the type of, he has the type of brain where he would find marked cards, if that makes sense. And I gave them to him and I said, these are marked.
Wild, right?
Yeah, this is my friend Mike Kaplan. He's a comedian. He's very, very smart and very analytical. And I said, these are marked cards. Find them. And I watched him sit there and look and look. He did find them eventually, but it took him such a long time that I was so comfortable after doing that early on in this routine's development. Now I'm very comfortable if someone says, can I look at these? I'm like, yeah, of course. Anyway, and then I'll start talking to someone else. I'm not going to leave them in their hands for an insane amount of time, but I'm not going to get nervous.
Yeah, you're not worried about the marks being discovered.
Right.
And that's actually worth mentioning as well, which is when you first take these cards out of the packet and you start looking for the marks, you might do what I did, which is go, oh my God, I'm never going to be able to read these. It's not true. They're very well hidden, but you do need to spend, I would say, a few hours really getting comfortable. And this is not, you shouldn't be trying to do this trick 10 minutes after you've got it anyway. But don't for a moment think that these marks are difficult to read. It's just, I think what it is, that as magicians, we're so used to looking at marked playing cards and the various systems that have now become prevalent for that.
Where you're looking at a 3 and a club shape.
Exactly, right? As soon as it's the kind of a different kind of, this is block out work and so on, as soon as it's that kind of approach, it's just a little period of time that's required to sort of flip the switch in your mind to really see it, and then it becomes super easy.
Yeah.
But you do have to flip that switch.
100%. I do want to talk about cold reading.
Yeah.
And cold reading with tarot cards as the jumping off point, because this is one of the things that Luke has so much more experience than me with, is doing cold reading. I'm essentially dipping my toe in this pool with this routine, and one thing that I like about this is that routine has made it easy for me. Because I, as a magician and a comedy magician, I never really felt comfortable cold reading people. It didn't really have a context, and I felt nervous that, oh, if I get something wrong, it's gonna reflect poorly on me. Not like a mentalist where they just take the hit and it's fine when they miss. But with this has allowed me a way in, because I have this lifeline of, regardless of if I miss on every single random guess that I have in the cold reading, which won't happen, but even if it did, I have this lifeline where I have something to return to that will always hit. But you have much more experience than me in this world, and I'd love you to talk about looking at a person and making judgments.
So the very first thing that I'll say is that the right way to learn how to give readings is to start giving readings. And that isn't meant to be some kind of Zen riddle. That's a genuine thing, which is there comes a point where you just have to jump into the unknown. And it is frightening, and it is stressful, and you are worried, and all of those things, but it's completely natural. A lot of people that talk to me about like cold reading or reading in general, they've never taken the leap because they're terrified by the leap, and worse, they think they're the only ones that feel that way. And then they think that means that they haven't done enough research, they're not ready for it because they feel this way, but all these other people don't just go and do it. But that's not true. Every single person felt that way before they started. So the first thing to do is to acknowledge that if you feel frightened or nervous or concerned, completely natural, and the only way it goes away is by doing it. The great news is that feeling of fear is now dramatically reduced because you've got a template for success. Right?
Yes.
So this routine becomes the template in which you can hone your cold reading skills. So the first piece of advice I have for anyone is really utilize the template, because now you have all the strength that comes for free of the trick without the fear of the reading. But when it comes to the actual reading itself, I won't go too long, but the first thing is that I actually think cold reading is a terrible phrase, and only because cold reading is a kind of example of a very magician-y way of thinking about the world. And so this is what happened. Magicians started noticing tarot card readers doing things they couldn't explain, so the magicians assumed there must be a secret. The magicians decided to start calling it cold reading. The tarot card readers didn't really try that hard to keep their secret. In fact, they were quite happy to tell you it. They are looking at the cards, they are telling you the meaning, and they are telling you what the cards say to them on an intuitive level. So, maybe that's the actual secret, right? Maybe they weren't pretending. Maybe we didn't need endless books that say, a FOIA statement allows you to make a statement that will be applicable to everyone. Yes, it does, but it also sounds like a statement that's applicable to everyone. Like a lot of cold reading technique that's been inherited into magic, to me, is verging on satire. Because imagine I walk out on stage and I say, I get the strong psychic impression that at times you're quiet and reserved, but at other times you can be the life and soul of the party. It's a very common actual line from the FOIA statements that Ray Hyman made famous in his articles about those things. I think that sounds like a Johnny Carson sketch.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if Carson came out on stage, bumbled out as some, funny psychic character, it's not a million miles away from a scripted gag where you'd be like, I sense as a child you were much shorter. Right? It's only maybe 5% more before it becomes really quite funny. So the first thing that I do in all of the readings that I do is get rid of that notion that I am sitting at home memorizing script that's going to apply to everyone, because it doesn't exist. So if you go into the environment to perform and you think, I've got my magic bullets, it's not going to work, because those magic bullets will just miss everyone, right? You'll get nowhere near their target, to keep extending that metaphor with your American target tarot gun.
Let's not.
That was awkward, wasn't it?
That was uncalled for.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I was trying to extend the metaphor like I was Max Maven or something, but
Sure.
I couldn't do it. Couldn't do it. Max has got good skills for that. So what I would suggest with these cards is to first spend some time learning the actual meanings of the cards. Now, I'm not going to go through that now because that's your homework. And the good news is it's really simple homework. Learning tarot cards is significantly easier than learning magic tricks. So let's take the Fool as an example. I suggest learning the basic meaning of the Fool. The beginning of a journey, innocence, excitement about what's about to come in the future, maybe a little naive, maybe not really understanding the world as he sets out on his journey, and all of those basic things that you can find online for free or in any tarot book or in the instructions for this product. There's really no excuse to not know that. Once you do that, though, a really good step, I think, is to spend a whole day thinking about what all of that means. And you need to form some level of a relationship with the card itself. And what I do is, interestingly, I associate people to the cards. So when I look at the Fool, I actually think of a very specific person in my life that I know. And he becomes a kind of template for what I might say when I see this card. I think about him and how he lives his life. So I say interestingly because that's part of the presentational hook in your effect, but I use it as a kind of secret, not as a presentation, but as a secret. So the first thing is become super familiar with the actual cards themselves.
And then also, if I may interject here for a second,
if you want to direct what you think is useful, that would be so much easier because it's such a big question.
Sure, it is a big question. I found it very, very handy early on in this development, and you probably will too, is to ask some friends who you're comfortable not saying these are friends that I want to perform this for, but these are friends who I want to help get better. I want to help myself excel at this trick, so I'm going to talk to them, is just lay these cards out and say, what do you think of when you think of each one of these cards?
Yeah, precisely.
I found that very, very informative because people started saying, well, I think, and especially because most people aren't going to be familiar with the tarot, you're going to get a great assessment of what people, when they see strength, what do they think of? What type of person do they think of? So if you go to a friend and say, I want you to assign a friend or someone in your life, don't say a friend because it could be family, you don't want to limit the selection.
Someone in your life.
Someone in your life who could be represented by each one of these people, write them down on a piece of paper. Mm-hmm. Now, take out that paper and I want you to tell me who those people were and tell me about them.
Oh, interesting.
And you will find that if you do that with 5 or so people, you're going to get these trends. And you can make notes and say, okay, well, most people associate the Empress with a mother figure or a strong, a strong female in their life. It has different, it has greater meaning in the tarot. But a novice or someone who doesn't understand this at all is going to jump to similar types of people.
Yeah, well, literally the visual language of the card is going to lead them in that direction. Right?
Yeah.
Like, essentially, for most people that you'll perform this for, these might as well not be tarot cards. They might as well just be paintings.
Yes.
Right, because that's their level of relationship to what they're seeing.
Sure.
So all they can do is take in the visual and then the expressive meaning of the title of the card itself. So in general, when I sit down to do a cold reading, it's all about my own mindset, which is one, I'm not out for hits. Right? Like, I'm not out for hits because if I'm quantifying the quality of the reading simply by the number of times that they agree, then it's probably not a particularly useful experience for either of us. So instead, I don't view it as a cold reading. What I think of it in my mind is like a kind of a genuine dialogue between me and them. So the ultimate goal, I think, of any reading is to explore things in ways that they haven't before. So this is kind of a very simple shift in the way that you think about things, but it's also liberating because it means you're no longer worrying about left scars on knees or whatever it might be, scars on left knees and so on. So the first thing is that it's a dialogue. So I think an interesting thing to do would be for me to run through what I would do in a mythical performance. So you go through the structure. So you pick a card for each part of the sequence, and I'll just give, and this isn't pre-planned, so it won't be like fantastic. It will be a genuine stream of thought experience, but it could be useful, and I'll talk about why I'm doing certain things at certain times.
Sure.
So in the very first selection is that I think about a person from my own life, correct?
Yeah.
And then I select one card for that.
Yep.
So you can just put it face up because we're going to talk about the actual...
Absolutely. And I will choose strength.
So the first commentary on this is, I'm assuming that is chosen in 90% of instances.
Well, strength and the Empress.
Okay,
and I find that if I'm looking at a spectator who I see as I make the snap judgment on them that I think this person is a pretty strong feminist, I'm going to play the Empress first.
Right.
A man or a woman, whoever I'm performing this for, if I make the judgment that they're a strong feminist, I'm going to play the Empress, and I find that hits very often.
So you're sort of responding to what you see in front of you in this first moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Because I look at this person and I say, I take a moment and I say, if I was this person, who would I compare to someone in my life? And so Strength and the Empress, of course, are going to be the two biggest hits. But if I see, I did this for someone and I happened to know that they were a lawyer, and I put Justice down first, and it hit immediately.
Yeah, of course.
You know, if you see someone who's just covered in goth makeup, probably the Devil's going to come up as the first card.
Right.
So, you know, use the knowledge that you have looking at them to make that snap judgment.
Yeah.
But Strength and the Empress are the two most common.
So let's say Strength comes onto the table. I would start talking about things like, and I'm not doing this within the structure of the trick, I'm just doing it as an example of the way that you can use the cards to form information, and then it's up to you to put that structurally wherever you want it to be.
Yeah.
But with Strength, I would say something like, okay, so the very first feeling that I get on an intuitive level here is actually that this is a person in your life that's been a constant companion. It's not always been easy. In fact, their greatest power, their greatest influence on you has at times also been one of your greatest challenges. Because one of the things that you have a real connection with that person is this idea of integrity and doing it in your own terms. And there have been times where you've compromised and you've thought to yourself, they wouldn't do that. And that's a challenge inside of you. So the interesting thing is they say that you can tell a person's character by the company they keep. I think you're keeping very good company in this person, but you shouldn't be beating yourself up because you're not there yet. Because you're much younger than them, aren't you?
Yes.
Right, so now we're into the reading, right? So all I'm doing is a story. That's it. And all I'm going to do is not say the word strength.
Yeah.
I'm just going to keep talking about the concept of strength,
Yes.
but in a non-linear fashion. So when you say strength, you know, the most linear thing to say would be, oh, I get a strong feeling here that this person has big muscles, right? Like, so obviously nobody would ever say that. A performer would never say that. But so all you're doing is taking a slightly different angle on the idea, and I'm just not saying the word strength.
Yeah, you're dancing around that.
Yeah, and you're just telling a story about what a person who has strength is.
Yeah.
The great news is that this trick isn't even cold reading, because it's directed by your presentation.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
So the idea that this is cold reading is not anywhere near as terrifying as it might be to others, because that first card goes down, you've told them to think of someone in their life, you already now know that you're talking about people in their life.
Yeah.
Right, so now all I have to do is positively describe, when I see strength, someone, and in my own mind think, okay, so what are strong personality traits that I admire in the people in my own life? But what I will now do, I never give just positive statements. So I always give a negative statement about the individual I'm reading on, but then give them the reason that they shouldn't feel bad about it. Right? So with strength, I'll say, you know, oh, one of the things that you've struggled with is actually that they've set this astonishing example, and you find yourself sometimes falling short of the example they set, and then you beat yourself up a bit. But they've had a lot longer to get there than you. Right? So, because in my opinion, if you give readings and they're all just, you know, wow, these cards indicate to me that you are a genius. Yep, you will win the Nobel Prize. You are going to be fabulously wealthy. Wow, you have the most attractive people. Yeah, thanks, but...
Right.
Yeah, right? So I want to give a negative, but not in a way that's like telling them that they're bad.
Yeah.
Right? So for me, it's a very easy way of doing that, is to give, to contrast like that. So my reading system is that I will start by telling a story about whatever the theme is. I'll then move into a direction where there is positive. That positive, literally just by contrast of night and day, gives me the negative, right? Whatever the positive is gives me the negative. So I ascribe the negative to be part of them, whether it is or not. I then tell them they shouldn't beat themselves up about it. And then, depending on how deep I'm going, I'll go back to the main theme and just repeat, right? I've used way more complicated systems over the years, but that's what I do now. It's just this very simple circular system. And each time I get back to the beginning, when I'm looking at this word of strength, I just pick another word to describe strength, or another, in this trick, I would pick another personality trait to describe strength. There will come a certain point when I want buy-in from them. So when I said in this little example, I say, but they're so much older than you. Right, that's a statement, but it's a question.
Sure, but also, I also want to point out, I think you did this intuitively with maybe without thinking about it, you didn't actually say older than me. Now, the person I was thinking about was, in fact, and that hit. But even if they wasn't, you said your language was they've had more time, which could also, they don't have to be older than you in that example. Maybe they've been focusing on this thing in their life for longer than you have.
For sure, yeah, for sure. If somebody's been on a vegan diet and running every day for 5 years, they're probably in a lot better condition if you chose to change your diet and run yesterday.
Sure, even if they're half your age. That was an interesting point that I wanted to make.
There is definitely a thing that will happen, which is the more you do it, the more your language becomes second sort of nature, and you're not really thinking about the choices you're making. But at that moment, what I'm really going for is the buy-in, because confirmation will continue confirmation. So once you've agreed with something the first time, it's much easier to agree with it the second time.
Sure, and you see, as I do, you'll see people smile, you'll see people like nod just a little bit without like not a like yes, but like like that. They'll relax, they're into it. And the moment, let's talk about moments of resistance. When you see the spectator, when you say something that the spectator perceives as being wrong, what are different ways? Because I found that people will they'll change their head position just a little bit. They'll maybe blink a little bit. What are other things that you think is good to look for?
The thing that I always notice is in various forms just tension, right? So whether that's a sort of the muscles on the face, the muscles in the body, the breathing, the eyes suddenly start staring a bit harder. But it's normally, I've noticed that it's normally tension being expressed in some way.
Yeah.
And I think the reason for that is that they're about to disagree with you, and they actually don't want to. They don't want to ruin anything. They, for sure, want to have a remarkable experience.
Yeah, unlike magic tricks in a lot of ways. Because sometimes people are just like trying to screw this up. Nearly everyone who's watching this is just game on, they're interested in it because it's about them.
Yeah. So I think the tension is literally them gearing up to have to disagree. So the disagreement will come in many different forms, right, depending on how they communicate with the world. But what I've found is that the kind of seed to the moment of resistance will be a few seconds before you feel or notice a tension in them. Because they're going through in their mind about, I'm going to have to say no, or no, that's not right, oh, this is uncomfortable, he's wrong, or... So I think the real seed of it is the tension. So that's what I try and pay attention to, because if I can notice the tension, I can reset my course before the disagreement.
Sure.
So it now is like a real game of sort of psychic power, because I am, there is nothing psychic about this experience, it is learned technique. But what I mean by that is that my goal is to answer their resistance before they've verbalized it. And in their mind, that's a psychic experience. So if I start by saying, I get the feeling that this is somebody that lived their life with great integrity, and I see that tension, I say, but you found it very hard to understand that. People around you would start saying that this person lived with great integrity, but inside of your mind, that was a confusing statement. So I've now done a FOIA statement, right? I've gone from one direction to the next. But the good news is, because I'm talking about in your mind, people are crazy, right? People are crazy. We're all crazy. So we can think whatever we want, and that's fine, right? So instead of saying, I sense that you can sometimes be the life and soul of the party and other times be quiet and reserved, I'm saying, if I ask people, they might say that you're the life and soul of the party, but deep down inside of yourself, you prefer it in those moments of quiet reflection. It's a completely different thing I've just said. It's still a FOIA statement because it's attaching to the way that you perceive yourself versus the way the world perceives you. This is a very easy way of saying two things that are opposite to each other. But in this example, what I'm aiming for is the moment that I see the tension, I reframe what I'm saying. Because then in their head, they're thinking, oh, that's wrong. Oh, no, he's right.
Sure, because you are reframing, but you're not saying, well, no, actually, you never say that. You yes and, to use the improv term, you yes and what you just said, but then you redescribe it and reframe it.
Precisely. And the reason that I've actually never spoke about this whole thing about the seed being tension. It's the first time I ever spoke about it anywhere. But the reason that I focus so heavily on that is because outwardly, so obviously there are three experiences happening in every magic trick, and then there are multiple realities underneath every other magic trick. But the main two things that matter the most to us as professional performers are the experiences of the individual engaged directly with the trick and the experience of those watching the effect playing out. So by being really conscious of that seed of tension, it removes moments of visible resistance. right? So if you're watching this, what I managed to do at that moment was eliminate what would be a direct illustration of resistance. So the audience would have seen that person say, well, actually, no. But because I've managed to catch it at the moment of the tension arriving, it's now deleting the visible resistance from the experience of the audience.
Very good.
So now it looks like you only ever get hits.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's very good.
So I'm not interested in hits. What I'm interested in is charting a course and adjusting it invisibly. Invariably, during a performance, you'll meet resistance, you might meet loud vocal resistance and all of that. So what do you do in those circumstances? So let's do the two extremes. I think the highest version of it is to be resetting the course as you go, using actual intuition, your own intuition about how you think this person is responding to what you're saying in tandem with just observation, right? Just seeing how they're behaving. But let's imagine that I make a statement and I'm performing for someone that is just, made of stone. They're not moving, they're giving me nothing. I can't spot any tension because they're already tense all the time, like whatever it is.
Or they're intentionally trying to...
Yeah, maybe they're trying to withhold,
Sure.
right? And then let's say I make a statement and they say, well, no, actually, I have never met a person in my life that I believe has any of those characteristics. Like, let's go really hard for a minute. I would just say, okay, well, all I can honestly do with you is tell you what I feel. And right now I feel a couple of things. I've been trying hard to get there. I really have been trying for you. But this is definitely a process of cooperation. If you continue to block it, all I can do is tell you what the cards mean. So I would say all I can tell you is the exact meaning of the card, because your intuition, it's not meeting mine right now. So the first thing I do, only with someone that's being that guy, right? I'm not going to derail the trick for someone that's just being normal levels of resistance. But let's say we've got someone that's really challenging.
Yeah.
I'll just turn it around and say if you don't want this to work, it's not going to work.
Sure. I mean, here's how I deal with this in the context of that routine. I find that doesn't happen very often.
Yeah.
And people who have been, when I close with this in a close-up set, which I sometimes do, if let's say I'm doing 3 or 4 pieces of magic for someone, if I'm going to finish with this and I find someone who's been resistant early on, I can still do this and they will usually come around.
Yes.
Because suddenly they want to be the focus of attention. That's why they're heckling you. But now you're doing something that's for them and suddenly they change how they're perceiving what you're doing.
And it's giving them ammunition to look great.
Right, absolutely, which they want to do, and that's the whole reason why they're being a jerk in the first place.
Right.
But I also find that if I want to abort that, it's really, really simple. I start doing the reading, I'm getting nothing. I could turn it on them and try to keep making it, or I could just finish, look, they match, perfect.
Yeah.
And that's the lovely thing about this is that you can...
You've got the template.
Right, you can cut it short
jump
and just
to the
go
end
right to
whenever
the
you
end.
need. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but again, let's play this ridiculous game of there's a gun to your head and you've got the worst spectator in front of you, right? It's never going to happen, but let's just play it.
I assume that worst spectator is the one holding the gun.
No, that's the manager.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, he's the manager. He wants his 15%, so you're finishing that trick.
Sure.
So
Where do you perform?
Yeah,
Jesus.
Yeah, well,
In this context, though.
It's Russia's a growing market, So I would at that point say, I really can't do this unless there's a sense of cooperation between us. So from this point on, I'm going to continue exploring my own intuition. If it doesn't connect to you, that's just fine. But I tell you this, my intuition is my favourite place to be. So much fun there. It's full of creativity, it's full of warmth, and it's full of love. I think maybe you'd enjoy it too if you just let it happen. But I won't force you. That guy now looks just like he's some emotionally stunted maniac, right, to everybody that's watching. Because all I care at that moment, honestly, if he's that guy, I know I'm not going to get there anyway, but what I care about is remaining in a position of power and dominance. And to remain in a position of power and dominance with that guy, all I need to do is be I'm so in touch with my feelings and you're not.
Boom.
So we're done now, right?
Yeah.
We're past that point, and then you jump to the end of the trick. But I still want that moment where I'm basically saying, because that statement that I made, a thing to remember about readings in general is that any statement is a statement of knowing. So if I say, oh, you'll love this restaurant, if I say that to you in life, essentially in that moment, I am claiming that I can read your mind. In a linguistic sense. I have said with certainty that you will enjoy this place that you know nothing about.
Right.
That is a statement of knowledge. And that's absolutely true in readings, right? So if I say, oh, your intuition, you're just so closed off to it. To everybody else, it's that's the psychic connection, right? The connection that I've formed through the cards is that this guy's not in touch with his intuition. So it's not a failure.
Yeah.
Right? It's a power play.
Sure.
And you don't really want to do that very often, but it's still keeping you in the position of being the guy that's got the power.
Yeah.
But the template nature is, again, as you've said, you can jump to the end.
Yeah.
So I suppose that's a couple of things to look out for on resistance. Hopefully that's useful.
100%. Yeah.
Any other final question, maybe?
Let me think for a moment. I'll ask this question. You can talk. We can talk about this for as short or as long as you want.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I'm performing this, I make bold statements that could be wrong.
Yeah, I love it.
And for me, that is a fun area to play in.
Yeah.
And I don't have a problem with missing there. And
No.
the reason I don't have a problem with missing is because I know that I have this tightrope that I'm on belay. I'm strapped to this thing so that if I fall, if I say something that's wrong and they just flat out say no, I'm okay with getting that miss because I know that their friend is the fool in this
Right.
moment. So I know that I can always come back to that.
Right.
So I have no problem saying, when you last saw this person, were they wearing brown shoes?
Yeah.
And if they don't remember, I just confirm it. Like, yes, they definitely were. You can ask them next time you talk to them.
Right.
Or going even more direct than that. They have it, scar on your left knee is a little more universal.
Yeah.
I have no problem saying, they wear a red shirt that you remember. Like, I'll say crazy things,
Yeah.
and sometimes they hit. And when they do, you have people who they can't contain
No,
themselves.
of course. So this is a question of calculated risk, right? So the idea of very often in mentalism, we champion the performers that take bold risks. That's all well and good as long as it's a calculated risk. Because actually, you're kind of an idiot if you're just taking risks.
Yes.
And the impact of the risk isn't strong enough to take it.
Sure.
Right? Like, so my thing with risk is always I want it to be calculated. If I'm going to make the statement, I want to make a statement that is unique and unexpected enough that when it hits, it's an event. Right?
Yeah.
But I only want to be able to make those statements in a trick that I have enough impact inside of that if it misses, it doesn't matter.
Sure.
So I calculate the risk of the statement.
Sure. So your return on investment with that bid is always going to be there.
Always good, right? Always good. And that's what keeps it professional. Otherwise, you're just making crazy guesses that don't work.
Yeah.
But I absolutely would suggest making statements. This might be a little bit controversial, but I do it all the time using my actual intuition. And I think intuition is absolutely a thing. I think we do genuinely have it. I don't think there's any psychic power under any of this. You don't need to call James Randi or Penn and Teller. I'm not making any weird claim. What I am suggesting is that in the course of the trick, look at the person in front of you and just notice what you think and feel about them, and then make some statement that's kind of outlandish, but for some reason comes to your mind in that moment.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't recommend having crazy statements that you use each time.
Right.
Right?
Yes,
So,
and for me, and let me specify, one thing that I do is I look at that person, I compare them to someone in my life who they remind me of,
Yeah, fantastic.
and then I'll make a statement about that person in my life.
Yeah.
Or someone in that person's life who they know.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I use as my guiding
Yeah,
force, so that
it's
if I'm
very
going to
good.
make a guess, there's something behind it.
Yeah, no, very good. It's like a doppelganger, like
Yeah.
a projective doppelganger sort of approach. And that's great. I'm a little weirder than that with what I do with the statements in the sense that I just say stuff. But what I always do, I never pose it as a question. So, for example, the brown shoes example, I wouldn't say, when you last saw this person, he was wearing brown shoes. I would say, as I'm speaking to you, I don't understand this, but I see an image. It's a really strange image. It's a pair of brown shoes, and they're covered in ice cream. I don't know what that means yet, but this is the thing with intuition. It's like solving puzzles. I get ideas, and sometimes I don't understand how they connect. Brown shoes and ice cream. Last time you saw him, he was wearing brown shoes? Yes. I don't know what the ice cream is yet. Or something like that. I've just made that up in the moment because honestly, without having somebody in front of me, I don't have the feeling to give me the image.
Right.
But what I will often do is pick outwardly very funny looking or sounding visual pictures. So like brown shoes covered in ice cream. Because the secondary value of that is that if everybody's watching and I say that to that person, let's just say for some reason they think that's really funny. If they started laughing, like, to the joke...
Yeah, everyone around sees that reaction and you're a god.
And at that moment I'll say, okay, perfect, you know exactly what those brown shoes and ice cream are about. go to the next one.
Yeah.
Right? And I'll just move it forward, which creates the illusion that I knew more than I did.
Right, and let's clarify too, if you see their eyes get really wide, you're going to assume that that's a hit, and then you're going to focus in on that more and take credit for it. Whereas if the reaction is a bigger reaction or a sizable reaction that doesn't look like confirmation, you're still going to take credit for that in that different way, but not explore it anymore.
Yeah. So yeah, you're literally, the balancing act is a good description there, because I'm always playing the larger perception of the statement against the coherence of the statement for the individual.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Because I can say stuff that makes no sense to the person, but I can make it look like I've just made huge impact on them to everybody that's watching.
Right, and the more that you do something like this, the better you will get at
Yeah,
it.
for sure. And finding, because the goal, of course, isn't to end up in a situation where they're polar extremes, right? You don't want to be performing in such a way that it looks like you know all of this stuff about the person, but in truth you don't know anything, because then that person leaves and says like, no, it's all wrong.
Yeah.
Or whatever. And you don't want to be in a situation where it's amazing for that one person, but anybody else that's watching is bored senseless. So your goal is to take these two sort of polar extremes and meet somewhere in the middle, right?
Yeah.
And to realise that these are techniques to balance out the greater impact of the routine.
Right.
So that's sort of worth consideration, I think.
Yeah, and I think one good thing about, and I think it's important to remember that something that we're both doing in this context, as opposed to having the same statements that you make about everybody, I found that when I perform this for someone, very often other people will want to see it, and they want to see this trick repeated, which you certainly can do multiple phases for the same group. And it's good to practice not saying the same thing to everyone, because you might be asked to repeat it immediately for another person.
100%.
And there's nothing worse than saying a statement about someone and then going to do the reading again and then saying that exact same statement.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, if everybody you do this for, you tell them that you're seeing brown shoes covered in ice cream,
right,
might not be so good.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's a great trick, and I think the real value, if you're at the beginning of a process of cold reading, is that it provides a template. And I think the real value, if you're really comfortable with reading, is that it gives you a very precise start and finish. Now, this is something that isn't immediately apparent, but one of the big challenges when you do readings or material that are framed around readings is that the audience, they'll stay there all night, right? If you start this with someone, the only real question you're going to get from them is, tell me more, tell me more, tell me more. So it becomes a magic trick that's perpetual. Never ends.
Yeah.
So having a template, if you're an accomplished reader, having a template where there is a conclusive, dramatically satisfying end is really of great practical value. So I think the routine and the sort of template notion of the routine is really valuable for not just newcomers, but also people that have been doing it for a long time.
Certainly.
I'm glad you shared it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here and talking about this.
Super happy. Bye.
You've made it to the end, and I'm proud of you. I want to thank you for getting this far, for putting in the work, and I'm so excited for you to perform this trick. I also want to say there's plenty of other great mentalism available. Read the books, kids. Read the books. Also, I want to thank the following people: Rob Dominich for helping turn me onto this routine, Tim Catlett for all of his design work, Homer Akana for permission to use a similar handling, Scott Brown for help with crediting and looking things up, of course Josh and Andy and George at Vanishing Ink, David Smith and Matt Gilmore, my directors of photography for this project. I want to thank Joshua Lucas for helping me find a great venue. I want to thank Christian Marcus for having that great venue. That's Deal Marcus and Company. So cool to film there. Also, a big thank you to Alan Ackerman, Max Maven, Jason England, Luke Germay, and Elaine New. And I'm definitely reading these because I didn't want to forget anyone. Thanks for watching.